Hello and welcome to the Horrorble podcast. That is the Horrorble podcast, where we like to bring you a refreshing and unique perspective and view on horror movies. A very face value and honest view on horror movies. We are based out of Louisville, Kentucky. My name's Devin, and I'm here with my buddies Manton, Brandon, and Dylan. Well, it's November 3rd now, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm quite depressed. Because Halloween is over.
I mean, I usually am, so no change there.
This is basically status quo right now.
Yeah, Halloween is kind of what the reason was that we started this podcast, and we had the whole marathon thing going, and it's kind of nice that we have this going now, so we can kind of continue.
Continues it, yeah.
It gives us a reason to live.
But the season itself is quite nice as well, and, you know, Thanksgiving is... meh.
Really?
Who gives a shit about some Thanksgiving?
I love me some Thanksgiving, but
I do,
it's
but
not
the whole
spooky enough.
Yeah, the whole season around it, there's just that one
not
day.
Spooky enough.
It's the, I don't know.
Turkeys are just not scary unless you're in the backwoods, you know, potentially
I
getting
agree.
killed
There
by
were
them
some
in Brennan's
turkeys that
place.
actually scared the shit out of me when we were at Brennan's watching.
But it's only when you
forest.
don't see them. It's the build up to the monster, really.
It's the tell don't show, right?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. If any of you don't know what they're referring to, we watched movies outside, and there was literally several wild turkeys in the middle of the night around us making noises throughout the entire night, and it was pretty terrifying.
But literally several.
It may have been. We don't know how many.
Several.
We're surrounded by them.
Anyway, before we get into this, we have 4 movies to review today. Generally, we have 3 or 4, as well as we'll have a reflection on the 31 and 31 marathon that we did. Before we get into that, we have some notes and tidbits to go over.
Tidbits. Nice.
Yes. So first, I want to reiterate, we have an email. It is horrorble.podcast@gmail.com. That's HORRORBLE podcast@gmail.com. And you can also check us out on Twitter at HorribleCast. That's at HorribleCast. And finally, pretty sweet news, thanks to Brandon, we are now on Stitcher.
Oh yeah.
I wish I knew what that was.
I have no
Could you
idea.
explain that to us, please?
Stitcher, I guess, is the Android version of iTunes.
It's pretty large. I mean, I kind of heard about it through word of mouth, so I assume it must be one of the larger content providers. Like, I know they just signed some radio deals where they have like internet radio coming through, so it should be one of the bigger ones.
So we're top 40 bound.
Absolutely, we're gonna pop off.
So, yeah, I know Lisa, my girlfriend, stole my phone once and secretly installed Stitcher like weeks ago, and I was like, what the hell is this?
And now you're addicted.
And now we're on it, so shout out to you. Also, with that being said, we are working on getting on iTunes as well. We just have we sent the application in yet, or?
Nope, still to do. I think we're
Well,
all a little
probably.
nervous because you only get one shot.
Right. You get one shot. If you try once and you don't make it,
They send
that's
you a
it.
letter that says, you blew it, buddy.
You
Sorry,
blew it.
we love you, but you blew
It
it.
just says that iTunes. Thank you, Steve Jobs.
I can't get over
Steve
that.
Jobs.
From the grave.
Yeah. It's getting spooky
That's
already.
creepy as hell.
I'd be honored.
That's unbelievable that I did not know you get one shot. Like,
It's pretty bizarre.
So would we have to
honestly.
change our name to like Horrorble with like an extra E on the end?
We'll change it to
Horribly?
BULL like we discussed.
Oh, yeah, I like that, actually, yeah.
Horrible.
The
I get hyped up and play that Eminem song and just...
Lose yourself?
Boom, boom,
Mom spaghetti?
boom, boom.
Anyway, some other news. Yes, actually, this is pretty exciting, and I don't want to give away too much, but in the past week, there have been some pretty big, exciting things happening with our podcast. We will have some pretty major interviews coming up in the near future, and you guys help me out here, back me up. And when I say major interviews, I don't mean some local guy who has been working on an indie film out of, Louisville, Kentucky. I'm talking...
Yeah. Screw those guys. We
I
wouldn't
hate
want
Louisville.
them.
It's a pile of garbage.
Well, yeah, sorry, I should probably watch what I say, but...
Yeah, honestly.
But I don't...
If anybody's listening.
I'm trying to give the impression that we have some big names, especially for a podcast as small and amateur as us right now. We have some big names.
That's
lined up.
that Devin Arnold, social engineering that you do. I don't know how you do it, man.
Invaluable.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think we can put it as these are people that we respect tremendously in the horror field who are going to be,
Right.
I mean, who have given us the time of day, who acknowledge that we exist, which is pretty big.
It's big. And again, just keep listening to us. We come out every Tuesday. We're going to give more information on that as the interviews approach. But right now I'm trying to keep it a little bit under wraps. Also, I don't want to kind of blow our load too early, so to speak, and kind
So to
of
speak.
screw up. If somehow the interview doesn't happen, it falls through, and then we have this big build-up. But last thing I want to say on that, I can tell you literally the last episode of the podcast we did, the most recent one, we kind of gush over some of the movies that might be involved in these interviews without even knowing at that point if we would ever even have an interview.
Yeah, we weren't just gushing over them because we might be talking to
Right.
some of the people involved.
I didn't even watch one of them, so there
Yeah.
you go.
Oh, wow.
But he gushed over it
Spoiler
anyway.
alert.
Spoilers. Yeah.
So yeah, as those interviews approach, we will of course reveal it ahead of time to give you a little bit of warning and what movies to watch beforehand before we go into those interviews.
Yeah, we tend to skirt around spoilers usually, but I think when we have these interviews, it'll be necessary to
They will not be spoiler free
talk about that.
for sure.
So before we get too far away from the intro, kind of going off the point earlier that we have an email address, still the offer's on the table.
Yeah.
The first person to send us an email gets their email read on the cast.
Did Kelsey send us one?
My girlfriend might have sent us
Are we not counting?
Well, I don't know.
Very
I don't
nice
think we
email.
should count related.
We did say moms and girlfriends, and it was a very sweet email.
It was
threaded.
basically so proud of you, sweetie. I mean,
She really is.
so proud of you, sweeties.
Hashtag first, hashtag dibs.
Hashtag first, hashtag dibs.
But no, she's great. She's one of our best, greatest supporters.
Yeah, props to Kelsey.
Again, we would love to have one of you outside listeners send us an email. Speaking of, again, we're getting lots and lots of listens, a lot more than we originally expected. So big thanks to anybody listening. Apparently we have 4 listens out of Ghana, so shout out to
Shout
our
out to
Ghana
Ghana crew.
fans.
Shout out to that one town in Ghana that just has statues of us already.
We got your backs, guys. We're doing this for you. So yeah, thanks again for all the support and the listens from both, of course, our friends and family, because a lot of them are listening to this, and people that just stumble upon this through Podomatic or Stitcher or
Absolutely.
what have you. But yeah, please check us out. Send us an email. Follow us on Twitter. Tweet at us, and we will discuss your emails on podcast.
Except you, Kelsey. Sorry.
Sorry, Kelsey.
We love you.
But yeah, you can send us anything from your favorite movies, your top 5 list. You can send us the reviews, your personal reviews of movies we discuss, or just criticize us. I don't know.
I think
you could
suggestions too for movies
Suggestions.
that you want us to see would be great.
Yeah,
Make us
yeah.
read the most disparaging things about ourselves. Just
And
put it
yeah,
in
if you want to just heckle us, that's fine too.
Dylan, no, he brings up a good point. We would love for you to send us some recommendations in movies, and eventually, I think that's the path we'll come down. Possibly, is if we can get, because we're coming up with 4 movies. It's kind of a grab bag type thing where that we watch throughout the week. But it's such a loose format that we could easily do something where we choose an email of four movies, or we choose 4 different emails with one movie and watch those. That way, you get to hear us talk about your recommendations. So again, check out that email. It is horriblepodcast@gmail.com. So let's get into this 31 and 31 marathon.
For those who maybe didn't listen to the first one, can you explain briefly what that is?
Right, yeah. For October, for the past few years, we have strived to watch 1 horror movie a night for the month of October. And naturally that turns into late September because we get a little too excited.
we get so revved up. We
Just
can't
pumped.
wait.
Yeah, so it kind of trickles in starting from September and then goes into October. And again, 31 and 31 is kind of an inaccurate name, as I maxed out at 57 movies this year.
I don't think I even broke 20.
It's mostly a thing that I do, and these guys join me as much as possible, but granted, it is at my apartment, so it's kind of difficult for them to...
Devin does somehow
make
manage
it
to
there.
make every movie at,
It is-
at his own
it's
apartment.
It's so weird. I can't believe that.
It's quite a feat, though. No, you joke, but it's pretty taxing.
Oh, it's pretty taxing sitting
It's
on my
hard to sit
couch.
there and
It's-
watch movies.
56 movies in less than 2 months, especially horror movies. It took its toll on
I'll
me.
give you that. Sometimes you started these so late at night that it's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, I mean, there were days that I was so busy that I would start my daily movie at 4 a.m. and have to be awake till 5:30. It sucked. But yeah, 57 movies total. It was a pretty solid year. We had
That's short selling it, man. I think this was a really, really solid year.
right.
overall.
Absolutely.
So basically, gems aplenty and stinkers a few, as we would say at this podcast.
That's what was so surprising when we started this cast. It was like, a few weeks ago, and we were kind of 2/3 of the way through the 31 and 31 marathon, and we were all kind of optimistic about how it was going. But if you actually look back at the previous years, like we mentioned in the last, that was the first cast, I don't remember, but that second year was just filled
Just
with
awful.
Yeah,
just
there was a lot of
awful
crap.
movies that
All
I think
around bad.
most of us have long forgotten, except for a couple masterpieces of the
Right.
I think
stinker
that's
genre.
the worst is the ones that you forget. I mean, I always like the ones that
Yeah.
are shit, but you love them.
Yeah.
Or at least have a good time.
I mean, American Ghost Story, I'll never forget.
No, I'll
exactly.
never forget
But it
that
was
movie.
one of the worst movies I think I've ever seen.
I wonder what makes a movie stick with you that way, no matter how much your brain wants to push it out. What is it that makes us remember that awful movie?
Sheet Ghost.
Sheet Ghost, there you go.
Also,
one.
like when we screenshotted that he was
Oh,
supposed to be a
God.
writer, this
Yeah.
this protagonist, and we screenshotted one of the things he was writing, and it
Oh,
was the most
no.
hilarious screenshot.
Completely lacking in commas. Just,
Oh, it was written by like a fourth grader. Or
I
something.
think, honestly, we need to save that one, though, for if we do the cream of the crap.
I think we
episode.
should.
Cream of the crap,
We
I
have
would
to
love
bring
to
that
do
one
that.
back.
Also, if we get the director to do an interview with us, I'm sure he'd be happy.
Explain yourself, please.
We love the movie. But no, what I was just trying to say was this year was, I don't want to like understate how amazing this year's run was. We had so many good movies. So many movies I've never heard of, but just
Right.
absolutely blew my mind and raised my expectations for
I mean,
future
it's
years.
what, like less than 3 that were even subpar.
Right,
Yeah.
right. There were very few subpar ones, and I watched them all, and I can say, yeah, there was probably of the 57, only a few come to mind that I just genuinely did not like. And they're right. You can't undersell this year. Honestly, I almost want to say this year was better than the first
Oh,
year.
God, yeah.
And the first year was, and since the first year, we've been exposed, or at least I've been exposed to over 100 or so new horror movies. So that's saying a lot. The first year, there was so many great movies that I hadn't seen yet, and this year, obviously, I had seen quite a bit more, and somehow we still managed to dig up a lot of great movies. So, if you guys don't mind, without further delay, I can go over every single movie watched. It'll be really quick, and we can kind of discuss it as a whole.
Do it.
All right, so starting in September, we watched. Man,
What did we start with?
oh yeah, you're ready to hear it because it's a big one. Resolution.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, I didn't get to see that one yet.
All right,
do.
I really want to.
first movie we watched was Resolution. Great. Sleep Tight. Jeez, this is starting off strong. Sleep Tight out of Spain. Dabe, and then there was Dabe is a Turkish movie. Then the two sequels of Dabe, and I'm not even gonna try to pronounce these.
Sin Carpmass or
It's,
something.
yeah, it's like Sin Kartmasi and Ben Sir Vakarsi.
It's pretty good, I guess. I don't know.
Right? House of the End Times. rather. The Burning, Macabre, The Conspiracy. And then in October, this is when the daily consistency started, where I watched one a day at least. So October 1st was Remake, which is a Japanese one. I think it's also called Reincarnation, is the English translation. The Purge Anarchy, The Collection. Horns was October 3rd. Next day was In Fear. And then A Field in England and the ABCs of Death 2. Then another rewatching of Your Next, of course.
Wait, did we do that 2 times this?
Yes.
We
Two
did.
times.
Rewatching.
Count 'em, 2.
Minimum 2 times. We got to splatter that one in there.
Splatter.
After
Scatter.
that-
Blood splatter.
After Your Next was Night of the Creeps.
I love that one.
Yeah. After that was a few movies: Julia's Eyes, Return of the Living Dead, and God Bless You, The Evil Dead. After that was Alone, which I believe was a Korean or Taiwanese movie by the guy who did Shutter, so it would be Taiwanese. And then The Devil's Backbone, of course, Del Toro. October 10th was The Evil Dead again, because why not?
Hey,
October 11th was Nightmare on Elm Street.
classic.
The original, of course, absolutely not the remake. October 12th was Lake Mungo. After that, Splinter, and then The Brood. After that was Bedeviled, which I believe was a Korean revenge movie we talked about briefly.
Hey, we got another one of those.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Korea, man. I don't know what
Loves their revenge.
They just love some vengeance.
Yeah. After that was Inside, the French movie.
That was French.
It is
Yeah.
French.
I haven't seen it in years. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah.
Though they were probably
you wouldn't
speaking
have
French
guessed
in it,
that.
I guess.
Probably.
Have
Shows
you
how much
seen
I
French
remember
horror
it.
movies? High Tension included. But after that was We Are What We Are. After that was a few more, 3 of them. The Pact, Dead Silence, love it, and Haunter. October 18th was 1408. The next day was The Changeling, Dark Water, and then Exorcism of Emily Rose. After that was Friday the 13th, 6, Jason Lives.
This is the only Friday the 13th movie you did. You just did the sixth one.
So how did you pick the sixth one?
No,
there,
that's not true, actually. I'll continue.
This year?
Yeah. October 21st was In the Mouth of Madness. Love it. And then, of course, I had to transition straight into Prince of Darkness, both John Carpenter. After that was Poltergeist, classic. And then we watched Carrie together, the new one, me and Dylan at least.
I was there.
And then October 25th, you know this is hard for me to keep track of. October 25th was the marathon, where we watched A Bay of Blood, VHS Viral.
Our last podcast.
Your Next, WNUF Halloween special, and The Canal. And yes, as Dylan said, our last podcast, we go in depth on all of those movies, if you're interested to hear about those. And that's where literally several of turkeys were walking around us. October 26th was Paranormal Activity. No, the original. Paranormal Activity, the first. I watched that. I was lazy and it was on TV. And then the next one was a similar thing. Friday the 13th, the original, was also on TV, but that one's decent.
I love that one.
Yeah, we can. That's another topic for another
Maybe
day.
for another
cast,
yeah.
After that was Evil Dead the Remake. That would be October 28th. We're getting more recent. October 29th was I Saw the Devil, which we'll discuss tonight. And then October 30th was Halloween. I watched the original Halloween then, and Last House on the Left also will be discussed today. And then on Halloween, we watched Pumpkinhead and the Babadook, which will also be discussed today.
Both of those.
Yeah. And then I rewatched Dabe with Manton and Blutster.
I'm still the only one who hasn't seen Dabe at this point.
I only saw half.
Don't bother.
I need to rewatch it.
Don't bother.
I completely disagree with
Come
Manton.
on.
That'll be a great one to discuss.
Oh, okay.
So, with that being said, I'll go ahead and I'm kind of reading off a Facebook post that I did in review, and I kind of did my stinkers of the year, because we coined these terms now. Stinkers of the year and my gem of the year. So for me, and we can all kind of say our own if we want, but I'll start off with mine. The stinkers of the year. One of them was not even in the marathon technically because it was so terrible, and it was so early on that we all decided to stop it, and I feel terrible.
No, we didn't all decide. I was rallying for us to continue through this one.
So glad we did, though.
I am too.
It would have been a shameful viewing, just to shame ourselves and punish ourselves for having chosen this movie. But it's another one of those independent films that we just root for them so bad. We want them to succeed, but it just didn't do it for us. The acting was horrendous.
Yeah, maybe the second half of this one gets so much better, but it would have so much ground to make up.
Let's put the name out here.
Lord of Tears.
Lord of Tears. Lord of Tears, and you can look it up. There's a lot of articles on it, and there's a lot of praise on it, which again is just mind-boggling to us.
Anybody who's seen the first 10 minutes would disagree.
So please, this is where our face value and our honest perspectives come in. The most importantly, this movie's not good.
There you go. That's all you need to hear.
It's quoted on the box art. This movie's not good,
Horrible
Devin
podcast. Right. It's terrible. And then the second one, I noted in my review that it's a little more controversial as a pick, and we'll discuss this today. Maybe not here at this podcast, but Wes Craven's directorial debut, Last House on the Left.
To clarify, still talking about stinkers here.
Yes, this was the other stinker. I only had two ones that really stuck out to me. There's a few that I didn't love. I didn't love Friday the 13th, 6th, and I'd already seen that, though. But this one was also... We'll go more in depth, but it made my list of stinker of the year, and we'll leave it at that.
Spoilers.
Gem of the year, and there were so many good movies this year, and we've discussed that, but I wanted to choose one, and this one was fresh in my brain. I just watched it, and again, it's hard for me to say it's the best one, but it was the one that was freshest in my mind, and it was The Canal. We discussed it last podcast.
Masterpiece. Go see it if you haven't already.
Again, of course, go see this if you haven't. It's terrifying, and I kind of note here that this one specifically contained everything that I want in a horror movie, which ultimately is the reason I chose it. It had the drama, it had acting, great acting, it had great writing, it had great cinematography, sound design was unbelievable.
If you want to be filled in on this one, go to our last podcast, our second podcast, which we talk about it pretty in depth.
Yeah, it's just it kind of hits every notch that I need in a horror movie. So
I gotta agree, Devin, that's also my gym of the year.
Nice.
But I gotta give props also to Resolution,
Well,
which
let me-
I thought was spectacular.
we'll get in this right here in a second. I'm just going to kind of list off my last thing, and that was I said that I can't do one gym of the year without having a pretty lengthy honorable mentions list. And on my honorable mentions, I have Sleep Tight, Dabe, Resolution, The Burning, Macabre, Inside, Dead Silence, WNUF Halloween Special, and The Babadook. So, you guys please take it over.
Yeah, I mean, yes, like I was saying, I agree completely on The Canal being the best. But narrowly close to that is also Resolution, which I really, really liked, and I think it was the best way to kick it off. I'd forgotten that was the first one we did. I'd have to add somewhere on there, I like Macabre a whole lot, despite it not generally being the kind of movie that I'm really into. It worked really well for me.
The movie surprised me. It was when you started out, it almost looks very gritty. Looks kind of low budget, kind of something that you're not expecting, and the plot is very familiar, I guess you'd say.
Right.
Yeah.
But basically, once you get past that stuff, once you get past the introductions, the movie just kind of kicks into gear, and I can never forget that. I can never forget that mom's stare. The main lady, I don't remember her name, but she just has this iron stare. What was it?
Lady Dara.
Yeah, Dara.
Impressive.
Darah.
This was so early in the morning, I could never remember that. But she just
Well,
had
it's
this
called
death
Dara,
stare.
Well, I had a nightmare about it that night, so I can
Oh my
remember.
gosh. Something about Scary Mom just really does it for me. Like, just adds a whole other level of
You're
fear.
just letting Freudian slip after Freudian slip.
I'm just
face.
embarrassing myself. I'm just going to
Well-
get off the cast now.
We should also note that this is the director of the VHS 2 movie that we praised last podcast called Safe Haven, and also the director of the incredibly mind-blowingly disturbing ABCs of Death short that we kind of mentioned. And was there something else that
The Raid and Raid 2. He
The
was
Raid
the
and the Raid
co-director.
2, of course. Yes. Those are probably his most notable films. So yes, this is his one of his debut films, and it's geniusly and deliberately made, and it's no happy accident. This movie was pure talent. Manton, did you have anything to add?
To what, Macabre?
Macabre or any of these films? I want to know. First off, I want to know if anybody, if I missed any possible honorable mentions in your opinions on this
For
year.
me, the standout this year was The Burning. And I missed a lot of the ones that you guys are praising a
Sure.
lot, just coincidentally, but like, The Burning just really did it for me.
It's a good.
It was a good mix of like, actually scary with that kind of 80s camp.
Has Jason Alexander in it.
Yeah,
Can't
the
go
Jason Alexander was pretty good too.
Can't stand you.
But it's better than Friday the 13th, I think.
I feel bad agreeing with you, but I think
Wow.
it's true.
Okay. Let me interject quickly because this would be a great movie to discuss on a future podcast. But
Sure.
I made the same point as soon as I watched it that Manton just said.
I think
that
I'm the only one who disagreed with you there.
Yeah, I think that if this movie had come out prior to it, and obviously it had clearly borrowed a lot of stuff from it, it's a full on. I'm blanking on the
Almost a
word,
rip-off.
but it's a ripoff. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a full on ripoff. But in our opinion,
It's directed by Rob Reiner, of all people. Did When Harry Met Sally.
oh wow,
It's weird.
Yeah.
What?
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's really bizarre.
Mind blown.
What it almost doesn't really surprise me
pretty sure
because
that's right.
one great thing again, we're walking a dangerous line because we're going to get into this movie, but the scenes that weren't pure horror genre were very just like summer campy fun, almost like you're watching an adventure / comedy camp movie, and you kind of forget that you're watching a horror movie, I guess you could say, because you're getting so invested in these like funny, silly, campy characters. And then, next thing that happens is you're watching 4 or 5 teenagers getting brutally murdered, and it's kind of cool. It kind of sets you off guard, I guess.
Not Rob Reiner at all, actually, just a fat guy who looks like him. Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein.
Way to miss the
Wow.
way to miss the shot.
We'll
there,
edit
Dylan.
that one out for you, Dylan. Don't worry. I was gonna
No,
say
don't bother. I'm fallible.
All right.
One last point about The Burning is the double denim outfits in that movie
Double
were
denim.
spectacular.
Some fantastic.
One of the main guys is running around either double denim clad or just single denim.
I think he might have gone triple denim at some point. Or full
Probably
denim.
had denim shoes on.
Ugh, man.
Spectacular. His buttons were all the way undone. It was just 80s galore on display.
I do think that like some of the charm in the characters and the writing in the characters made it a bit more enjoyable, like the first part. There's so many movies that start out with like the teenagers and those scenes where they're just talking, hanging out, being cool, but in this movie, those were much more enjoyable and better paced.
They were well characterized too for
what it was.
machete fodder
Sure,
or
yeah.
whatever.
That's basically what I was trying to say. Thank you for saying it more eloquently because I got lost. But yes, the characters were great in that movie, and so were the horror aspects of it. So, again, am I missing any that you guys would have put in as an honorable mention? I know I said a ton. I'll say it
that's
again.
pretty solid.
Sleep Tight, Dabe Resolution, The Burning, Macabre, Inside, Dead Silence, WNUF, and The Babadook. Were there any that stuck out to you guys that you can? I mean, the ABCs of Death 2 was awesome. I think me and Brandon would agree there.
I only saw the last number, or Z, the one that you showed,
Yeah.
which was really good. But
I almost chose not to put it in just because I had already had so many honorable mentions, which is kind of unfair, because that movie was so consistent, especially compared to the first ABCs
the
of
first
Death.
one's not at all.
That's what's so weird about it is you have so many different directors. I don't know how they managed to get a consistent level of quality across all that. I mean, you'd think there'd be some absolute garbage scattered in there,
They
but
probably learned their lessons from the first one, honestly.
For sure.
I just can't imagine. It had to be a logistical nightmare. But anyway, like I thought all the movies had equally high budget feel, very well directed, all had very consistent.
Right.
Yeah, that is a really good common thing that I hadn't noticed until you just said that, Bluester, is that they all did feel higher budget.
Yeah, I don't know how they did
They
it.
might have. I mean, I think in the first one, thanks to Adam Wingard's terribly meta ABCs of Death, they said that they get $5,000 for the film in their short. So I guess the first one they each get $5,000, and there's a very good chance that the first one made enough money that they gave a little more money for this one. And there's no doubt in my mind that some of these directors kind of pocket some of the money, and some of them do the opposite and sink more money into them, because there's just no question in quality of production. That some of these are way more high quality in production than others. So there's no doubt in my mind that I think that some smaller directors that want to make a name for themselves might sink in a little bit of their own money and like make this their big debut.
Yeah.
We're talking about ABC's 2 or 1.
I would think on both, but especially more ABC's 2. Another interesting fact or tidbit is that in the second ABCs of Death, not a lot of the directors were asked back, and no surprise to me was Adam Wingard asked back. And I felt like a lot of the directors in that first one were kind of confused on what to do, and in a way would even kind of bite the hand would bite the hand that feeds them, in that they would be given this opportunity and this money.
Squander it.
Yeah, and
Ty West absolutely squandered his.
Yeah, it was like a joke. But the thing about that is that I think Ty West was one of the overall.
Maybe he was
creators.
busy. I don't know.
Anyway.
His was miserably bad, though.
Sorry, Ty West.
Anyway, let's not.
I'm not. Ty West, I'm calling you out. I'm putting you on blast.
You got murdered for good reason in your next, buddy.
Well, for the record, I love Ty West, but I didn't like that. Anyway, watch ABCs of Death 2. There's a lot of great shorts in that. And again, there were probably 20 other movies that I could name that I really enjoyed, but if I had to choose like the best of the best, those are the ones that I felt were the best. Anybody have any final thoughts on?
Well, I was going to say, what about this crop that we got to get into tonight? Because we got some good ones and some to talk about.
Was that a fart sound?
It was,
was that a
like
raspberry?
It was a non-committal fart sound, maybe halfway between a raspberry.
That's basically what some of these movies deserve for tonight. Let's just be honest with ourselves here.
Yeah, this will be an interesting one. Again, the movies that we will be discussing are Pumpkinhead, I Saw the Devil, which is out of Korea.
Another revenge movie.
Right.
Wow.
The Babadook, which is an Australian ghost story movie that just came out recently, and you might have heard of this if you're listening to this. It's a pretty big name.
A lot of good press.
Right. And then finally, again, Wes Craven's directorial debut, Last House on the Left. So we're going to save that one, because that one will have some interesting talking going on there. So let's start off with one that I feel will be a good way to kick things off, because we can first off discuss what we feel the genre of this movie truly is. I Saw the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
Who was wanting to do the synopsis for I Saw the Devil?
I'll go ahead and take that one. So I Saw the Devil is sort of a revenge flick, as you guys have already said. It's about a secret agent whose wife is murdered by some madman without much motivation, especially at the beginning, who has been taking young girls and murdering them, hacking them into pieces. So it's basically him against this murderer, basically torturing him. It's almost like a reverse torture movie where the hero is torturing the villain. And as Devin said, I don't think this is actually a horror movie. I'm not sure.
I'll disagree, but we'll talk about that later.
But yeah, I don't want to give too much more away. I don't know.
Right.
I think that's pretty much the bare bones of it.
Right.
I think one thing that's really worth mentioning here, because it's going to come up, is the fact that this movie is like 2 hours and 20 minutes long.
It is so goddamn long.
It is really long.
I was kind of upset with how long that was. Way too long, I would say.
That's a point we will
agree.
discuss.
I agree. But I think that length actually has to do with why I would consider this one a horror movie.
Huh.
And I guess that is kind of the first thing that we have to address with this one, because this is one that's marketed more or less as a thriller. But it also, I mean, it several things. I think IMDb has like the tagline of horror on it.
Right.
And there's some really horrific stuff in this
There
movie.
is, absolutely.
It is, in some cases, very difficult to watch. The way that I tried to explain it to somebody else was that this is 2 hours and 21 minutes of unceasing human brutality. And
I would
to
say
me, the horrific nature of that almost makes it a horror movie.
Yeah, I see your point, but I usually tend to disagree with that point, in that something horrific or disturbing can translate to the horror genre. And with that being said, I as well would not consider this a horror movie. I can see things that are disturbing and horrific, so to speak, and still not at all consider it a horror movie, because shock factor and shock value and intense gore and rape scenes don't, to me, translate to horror just because they're technically horrific, I guess.
I would pretty much agree. I think it would be kind of like if you were looking at, something like maybe Ichi the Killer. I don't know if you guys have seen that.
No.
I don't think that's a horror movie. It's disgusting and it's a lot of violence and disturbing imagery, but it's not a horror movie. I kind of look at this a similar way.
There were some scenes and elements that were kind of scary in a way, like legitimately scary, but I would say those were few and far between.
I would say definitely the first like quarter of the movie felt like it was going to go into a horror direction. I was expecting something like supernatural, paranormal, but it doesn't really go there.
It doesn't even come close to doing that.
It basically starts off very, there's a lot of unease in that movie, a lot of tension in the beginning, but after that first quarter, maybe the first half, it's just full-on revenge movie. I don't know. I didn't find it scary in any way.
Could somebody pull up the director? It's the guy who did
like Kim Si-won.
And he did Old Boy, right?
No.
He's not Old Boy.
Sure?
Old Boy is Chan-wook Park.
Okay.
This guy did not. Now, Chan-wook Park did actually do a vampire movie called Thirst. I don't know if you guys know what that
I've
one.
heard of that.
We should actually watch that. Yeah.
I thought for sure this was the same.
It does
director
actually
as Old
feature.
Boy.
It features the main character, the
Dae-soo-wo.
actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, Odesu. It features him.
Director is Kim Ji-woon.
Okay. And it definitely has a very similar feel to those movies.
It is
I mean,
very similar.
It is in that there's like a subgenre of Korean revenge movies,
Yep.
and for whatever reason that is culturally, that the Koreans just love revenge in their movies. I don't know, but this one I think is a really good example of it. I haven't seen Old Boy myself.
You should see it. It's
I watched
great.
part of one of the Vengeance trilogy.
Yeah, he has a revenge trilogy of movies, and this movie would fit right into that trilogy,
I agree.
which is interesting.
I think this one is really masterfully directed,
It's
with
great.
the exception that it's
Beautiful.
too long. It's really masterfully directed.
Some of the
Pretty
shots
pitch
are
perfect.
just gorgeous. Like that, the movie looks amazing,
It's
and it's so
beautiful.
at odds with its content. Like the movie looks gorgeous, but then
Yeah.
you're seeing some really, really, truly horrific things in this movie.
It's kind of smooth and really like
It's
slick,
very clean.
but the content is just so gritty. I mean, it's just horrible things happening.
And a lot of times, I can handle that stuff, but in this movie, I don't know. It was so at odds because and on one hand, I wanted to really like the secret agent who is sort of exacting his revenge and torturing this killer, but
He's not much of a character.
you
though.
can, well, part of it is you can almost have a fun time with the movie, but then some of the stuff that the killer does is just so messed up that I couldn't enjoy it on a level of like catharsis like I could with like You're Next, where she's taking out the killers. I couldn't enjoy it on that level.
The stakes are so much higher in this one.
Wait,
they just keep escalating.
Maybe I misunderstood you, but you do agree that this guy, this killer who is being tortured,
Sure.
you hate the hell out of him, right?
Oh, God,
yes,
yes.
he's a
He's
disgusting
Yeah.
freak.
I
And
love
I want
that.
to say the actor that did this,
Phenomenal.
So
Odesu, He's awesome. That's not his name, but that's what he plays in Old Boy. He was awesome in that too. He's awesome in this movie. I think he was actually in Lucy, that action movie that came out recently here in the U.S.
Yeah, I saw him in the previews. He's the dude who gets stabbed in the legs, I think.
He's great. He's a great actor, and he. This is a movie with a villain with a lot of personality.
Yeah.
And you hate him.
Right.
And you're supposed to.
You are supposed to, but they almost take it too far, considering. And one of the things that I wrote down was like this almost feels like a Spielberg-esque like horror movie where it's taken to this intense extreme, but there's a lot of like whimsical music. There's a lot of like very sort of expansive scenes to it.
But it comes to, I mean, just how overblown some of it is, how, like, in its own little weird fantasy world it lives. There's a scene, and I don't know that this is spoiling too much, where the killer is in a cab
I was going to bring that up.
with these two people. And the scene is beautifully shot.
I was just waiting my turn for that.
It is beautifully shot, but it is horrifically violent at the same time.
That was really well done.
It's so wonderfully done, but it's so over the top and so cinematic through it that it takes you out in some degree of how gratuitously
horrific
violent what you're looking at is. But on the other hand, you also have other scenes. Like there's one that is one of the most difficult things to watch I've seen in a movie. That happens in the medical clinic. That is it hurts.
That's the kind of stuff that like it feels at odds with the rest.
And
of the
it doesn't
movie.
strike a good balance. The movie does not strike a good balance with itself. And I think that goes also with the characters too, that you're not really sure who you're supposed to be rooting for, if anybody. And I think that's part of it. That's the intent behind it. But it plays with that so much, and again, because it's so long, you just kind of get tired of swapping sides between the two.
Right.
That aspect felt kind of heavy-handed to me, honestly.
As a matter of fact, I don't know if I was reading this incorrectly or not, but I felt like the I Saw the Devil title was supposed to be a little bit vague, and as in, like, who is the devil?
Well, they make, the cannibal or whatever makes that point.
Okay.
Pretty openly.
Right.
In a couple of scenes.
I remember that, because
there's also just another cannibal in it.
You have these two.
Everybody's crazy.
Well, first off, you have these two horrific humans, regardless of how you look at them. You got the killer and the awful person, and then you got the revenge, insane madman who just wants to spend the rest of his life torturing him. And then they do introduce more crazy people and don't really even go into it. Like, again, the taxi scene. I don't want to say too much, but that was pretty bizarre.
Let's just say that it looks terrible for the Department of Tourism for Korea.
Right.
I don't ever want to go now.
And then, of course, there's a cannibal that gets introduced about midway through, which is a terrific character, and the actor is great, and he's horrendous and scary as hell. And it basically is. It's just a bunch of crazy, just maniacs.
It felt almost to me like a really long but really good episode of Dexter. Like, the things that Dexter does right, this movie
there were definitely
really well.
some elements of Dexter in there. I thought of Dexter multiple times while watching it, in fact.
Which, and I think in some degrees, Dexter can be seen as, in parts, a horror show, too.
Sure.
And that's where I see the overlap.
It's kind of like that in this movie where, the main character is our hero, but... And it is, we're talking about it like it's a bit subtle, but it is kind of heavy-handed.
Yeah, very.
They constantly beat you over the head with, are you really
Sometimes
the monster, Mr. Hero?
Sure,
or is the killer the monster? Yeah. I wish I could talk a little more about the ending without giving it away, but I did actually like the ending. I thought the ending was pretty good.
Yeah, I like the direct ending, but the build-up to it takes a little bit too long.
Yes,
the movie's
about 20 minutes too long.
Let me elaborate on that. Yeah, the very, very ending is great, but in the movie... the pacing was fantastic until about an hour and probably 40 minutes in.
Yeah.
And then there was about 40 minutes, or maybe I should say 35 minutes to
there's a moment where they could have literally just ended the movie, and I thought
Sure,
that they were going to.
There was a few. Even the first time he got his hands on the killer, I was like, oh, this
That's a
is
short
ending
movie.
pretty quick.
Yeah.
But he continues to let him go, which was a cool touch.
It's a good call.
and we were
Makes it an
still
interesting movie.
we were still on the edge of our seats, and there was no desire for the movie on our parts for the movie to end.
I felt like I wanted it to end a few times.
I did.
No, I'm saying
bored.
at that point.
Yeah.
when-
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
After
yeah,
that
that's
point,
fair.
but again, like I said, about an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes in, that's when I was like, okay, now I'm starting to not care.
Right, yeah.
And there was
It takes too long for them to raise the stakes again. They do raise the stakes at the end, but they rush into raising the stakes.
And the bit right before the end, because I think the end successfully raises the stakes to about the
Yeah,
peak of where they
sure.
can go, but the part right before it feels like a weird kind of step back. It doesn't feel like the stakes are quite as big.
Something that I thought the movie did really effectively was illustrate why this guy getting revenge is ineffective. They did a really good job of sort of showing why the whole eye for an eye just doesn't work.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I thought that aspect was really well done. It just should have came about much earlier in the movie.
So if you got 2.5 hours to spare where you just want to feel terrible, but enjoy a movie, strangely, this is a good one.
It doesn't have that catharsis that You're Next. I hate to keep like bringing this movie
We're
up
gonna keep doing it
and stroking this movie, but like You're Next has that you want to cheer when she's taking these guys on. You want to cheer, you want to yell. In this movie, you don't really feel that. You just feel bad for everything that you're seeing.
The end certainly doesn't help with that either. It leaves you on a very note.
I would personally say that the first half you do have that feeling 100%.
Yep.
Especially the first scene because
when he gets them.
Yeah, you're just like yes, but then but I think that's are we agreeing that was a decision, a deliberate decision to make you feel less excited and happy towards the second half?
Yeah.
It definitely fits in line with what I think is the message of the movie. So yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think about that, but that's actually pretty clever on their part, if that was intentional.
I would think so, because I think you're supposed to be like, yes, that's great, and then like, okay, this is still kind of great, and then, wow, this is kind of messed up, and then I don't know I don't like what I'm watching.
I mean, and in some case, I think that it was intentionally too long.
For sure,
that's part of the
maybe.
movie. But I don't care for that directorial
Sure, I mean,
decision.
then
that's a little too meta for me.
Brandon, what did you think about this?
Yeah, did you want to weigh in?
Absolutely. Well, for one, I just want to say that I totally thought the director of Oldboy did this, and so I was just like, what are you doing, buddy?
Making the same movie.
Of course you didn't, so now all that's out the door, and that's just a big pile of gas.
Wow.
But it's hard for me to really root for this movie because the revenge genre is so large in Korea, and I feel like you have masterworks like Oldboy looming over it. And one of my main beefs with this movie, despite the beautiful shots, you can just tell this movie is just masterfully crafted.
Sure.
No doubt about it. But one of my biggest beefs was I was watching this movie and I'm sitting here having to have this inner conflict with myself about how much I enjoy violence, because this movie basically, I think you all kind of touched on it, but maybe you don't agree with me, but I feel like we kind of removed the characters from the equation and they're basically just vessels to deliver the violence.
Yes, absolutely.
And like,
with the
so
exception
much,
of the killer, I think.
I think the killer was, I mean, to an extent. I never saw any actual motivation for him. I feel like the director basically, or the writer, whoever it was, made him as purely evil as possible just so you could have the hero to vanquish him. I feel like that's all he was there for. And it kind of made me I'm watching it and there doesn't seem like there's any particular reason why everyone has to be murdered. And so I just felt wrong watching it, because it is gruesome and awful. But I think as far as a revenge movie, I think it's like the purest revenge movie I've ever seen. There's nothing to contaminate it.
It's such an incredible concept.
It is.
And the reason I think this is because I've had very dark thoughts of what if I was in this position of this killer? What if literally everything I had was taken away from me? Would I be satisfied with catching this guy and putting a bullet in his head and just being like, well, that's that? Or would I want to draw it out as long as possible because I literally have nothing else to live for at that point?
Man, I'm learning some dark stuff about you, buddy.
Well, I'm just saying, and I think that's what the point of this movie is that this guy, it wasn't, that obviously is the point. It wasn't enough for this guy to find this guy and then just kill him, obviously. What else does he have to live for now? He has nobody to go home to. He's going to go home to an empty apartment by himself and mourn his wife's death. So why not spend his time getting revenge for as long as he possibly can?
And he's damn good at it.
Yeah, and he
stretches it out more than he should.
You just think like, well, he'd either put a bullet in this guy's brain and sit in his apartment and just be done with everything, or he can at least just spend his time at least occupied doing something, doing the only thing he really has left to do with his life at that point, and that's to get revenge.
Now, I was thinking of something here. This is only tangentially related, but it seems to me that there's almost no character introduced in this movie who isn't just victimized in some way. Like, every character introduced in this gets the shit beat out of them in some way.
Pretty much, yeah.
And that's, I think, to me, what makes it difficult to watch, is that nothing's safe, nothing's sacred, and it's also what makes it so effective. But beware going in that this is not light movie going here.
Yeah,
not remotely.
The violence, in my opinion, was done so well that violence very rarely can affect me in a movie, but this one I think was just good enough for me to not be to be uneased, but to be like, that was well done.
Do you mean like the effects?
I just mean, yeah, just like the extent they took the violence, the effects, the way it looks, the things they did. Sometimes I feel like, okay, I get it. Now you're trying to be ridiculously over the top violent, and I don't like this. This, I think, did just enough and looked just good enough that I came out looking positively on it, I guess, and not like I want to throw up and I feel like I want to kill myself.
Only one scene did that to me.
Yeah. I have such mixed feelings about this movie. This movie has me more mixed than any we've watched. Like, there's so many things I like about it, but then there's so many things I just feel just gross about in this movie. It's weird.
Well, I think it's designed to make you feel that way.
I guess so.
And I think it may be unfair for us to approach this movie as a horror movie, because I don't know that it holds up as that. Yeah. So to have this on our Horrorble podcast, I think is a bit unfair to it, but I think it's worth knowing that, you know, if it's sold to you that way, even though I'm the one saying that I think it is in some ways a horror movie, I agree that it's not. That's not its main function.
Was this movie like marketed as a horror movie? Is that?
I don't think so.
Or? It's got. I mean, like, just taglines on.
I think it's in its own genre. I mean, yes, it shows up on some list
like IMDb,
of like,
I think
or like the best Asian horror movies of the past 10 years, but I don't trust those at all.
Yeah.
I totally disagree. I don't think it's horror at all.
No, me neither. I agree with you. But with that being said, let's give our final spiel on it and
recommend
give us
or not.
Recommend or not. And Minton, you started us off. If you want to do that again.
I'm actually going to go with not recommend, just because, one, this is a horror podcast and I can't recommend it as a horror film. Two, despite the beautiful aesthetic of this movie, the music, I really liked a lot of the music. I liked the shots with the music. It looked great, sounded great. And the villain, the actor of the villain was very good. A lot of personality. All that being said, it's a revenge movie, and you're much better off watching Oldboy, or Blue Ruin is another really good one that came out that I watched a few weeks ago. It came out this year. Yeah, it just came out this year, I believe. I think it was an independent film. It's really good.
It's
really
a
damn good movie.
So good.
So I recommend that movie instead.
Blutz?
So I just want to say, I didn't have very good things to say about this movie, but I don't want to take away from the things it does very well. I think if you're looking at an example of like a revenge film, I think this is the purest form of that, and I think that I want to like give you the cleanest slate to go into it if you want to go and check this movie out. I think that it's extremely well acted, which makes all of the insane things you're seeing seem that much more believable, because I can't remember the actor's name, but Dave Stewart, the guy who's in Oldboy, he is so phenomenal as a psychopath that it's hot actually, because he's so convincing. And I think that coupled with the great camera work and just how tight the movie is, despite its length, I felt like it kind of held itself together. I think it is a good movie, but I would not recommend it just because I feel like if you're looking at revenge films, I feel like there's other more interesting ones out there, like Man Said Oldboy, or even Devin, I think it's called Bedeviled. I don't remember what that movie's called.
But it was Bedeviled.
I wouldn't say that movie's better than this, but I'd say it's more interesting. I don't know that I'm going to remember I Saw the Devil, which is unfortunate because it's a well-made movie. So that's my 2 cents. Dylan, what do you got to say?
I actually am going to have to dissent here, and I give this a high recommendation. I really liked it. I hated myself for liking it, but I really liked it.
It does that to you.
And I do think, however, that it's maybe shouldn't get a high recommendation as a horror movie. And on this podcast, this maybe not be the best place for my recommendation. But if you're interested in crime dramas or just kind of deconstructions of human violence, you know, in the sense of like a movie like A History of Violence or something like that, this does a really great job of it. I am not terribly familiar with the Korean revenge subgenre. I've not seen Oldboy. I've not seen but like half of one of the Vengeance trilogy. But this one stood out to me. It was, I think, really well done. It's one of the best films I've seen in a long time, in that it's just put together really well, despite its length. But you got to go into it with the right mindset, which is that you're going to have your world destroyed by watching this movie. But yeah, it's good.
It's going to make you think about yourself while you're watching it.
Yeah,
so there's going to be some introspection during this one.
And it's worth it simply for that. It made me think about myself as a moviegoer and as a connoisseur of admittedly violent movies.
I'll agree with everything.
Devin?
Yeah, you guys summed it up well, and that's why I'm going to keep mine very brief. As a revenge and an action movie, I give it a high recommendation. As a horror movie, I just don't recommend it. And I kind of cheated there, but that's as cut and dry as I can make it.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next one. I think that we should go with Pumpkinhead.
Ooh.
Which is, I'm blanking on the name.
Stan Winston.
Stan Winston's,
All right.
one of his few movies that he actually wrote and direct. He's the world-renowned makeup artist and special effects guy. But yeah, take it away, Dylan.
I mean, like Devin said, this is Stan Winston's directorial debut. You may know him from Jurassic Park. What else did he do?
Aliens.
He did Aliens, Predator.
Oh, you
He
can
did
totally
the
see
Thing,
Alien
the
in there.
dog, and the Thing.
Yeah, he did
which
The Dog
is,
and the
one
Thing,
of the
which I
best.
actually thought was Rob Bottin up until this point, but Manton filled me in there. I mean, he is the messiah of practical FX. He is a really, really damn good
Right.
at what he does. However, what he does in this one is direct, and I think we're going to talk about whether or not we consider that his wheelhouse or not. But Pumpkinhead is I think it'd be best to call it kind of a dark fairy tale.
Sure.
I was literally just thinking the words fairy tale.
Yeah, it's I think lumped together in horror cult classics as unfairly categorized as a slasher movie, and it's got some similarities to that, but it features around a guy played by Lance Henriksen, who actually I liked a lot.
I did too.
He was great.
You may know him from Aliens, I guess he's in the second one.
Yeah.
right?
Did
He's
you notice
the
that?
android.
Yeah.
Did you notice that first shot where he's got? Well, I guess it's like the second one. He's got the flamethrower. So seeing him with that flamethrower
Yeah.
looks straight out of Alien. Well, that was
Well,
a
I think
nice
some of the
little
people
touch.
involved in this one, besides
I
Stan
believe
Winston,
so,
were
yeah.
also
I believe so.
on Aliens. It was kind of left over the cast-offs, if you will.
leftovers. It was the leftovers of Alien.
But this movie is basically about a guy who very early in the movie, his son, whom he adores, is accidentally killed by some dirt biking teens from outside, city folk, as they refer to them repeatedly. It's a pretty simple setup, pretty effective little setup, actually, in which he goes to this kind of this witch in the backwoods to summon a vengeance spirit to take out the people who murdered, however accidentally, his boy. And from there, you are introduced to the titular Pumpkinhead, who is found from a pumpkin graveyard, I think, dug up and
Pumpkins go
reanimated
to
through a blood rite or something. Great effects in this movie, and then the rest of it is debatable. But for the most part, you see kind of this Pumpkinhead thing picking off these people one by one and whoever stands in its way. That's the gist of the movie. It's really pretty simple, like a fairy tale.
Very simple.
There's not a lot to it. And I'm just going to start us off by saying that this is a movie that I am torn on and I have a lot of issues with. It's because I recognize some of the brilliance in it, and a lot of that goes with the practical FX, which Pumpkinhead looks great. I mean, it's a really,
question.
really cool looking monster. But then the execution of pretty much everything else falls apart for me. And the one thing that I have to mention first is the fact that nobody in this movie behaves like a goddamn human. It is insane to me. The reasoning behind anybody in this movie is nil. And it feels like it's written by people who have had their hands in every other aspect of the horror genre except writing, and directed by people who've had every aspect of horror except directing.
I feel like that's accurate.
So,
It probably
I mean,
is,
if
yeah.
anybody wants to take it away for specifics or anything, your thoughts on this one?
I thought it was interesting that you said that the other pieces fell apart, because for me, except for the writing, I thought the movie was actually pretty well put together, and it was cohesive, especially after some of the other stinkers we've seen this week. The acting was actually pretty good in this movie, and I really liked Mr. Android kind of leading us off. I thought he was
He's
pretty
great.
strong.
Lance
He's
Henriksen,
fantastic.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's good.
I loved him. He was awesome.
Yeah, he's great.
He was a beaut. But it's a mixture of the other elements coming short and absolutely being completely overshadowed by the clear masterwork here, the effects.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved was the actual Pumpkinhead design. I thought he was a little unorthodox considering the context of the movie. He was very otherworldly looking.
Demonic.
Yeah, he looks great.
He looked amazing, and it's funny that you mentioned that he was involved in Alien, because I was totally getting some Geiger vibes
Yep,
from
did
just
you-
He looks like a xenomorph.
Yeah, he
exactly
does,
the
he does,
ribs
yeah.
showing and everything, and like the way his arms are cocked back. I don't know. I thought that the creature was clearly amazing,
Very
and I feel like
impressive.
that was probably where 95% of the effort went, making sure that he looked great.
Yeah.
Not so much on everybody else.
The kind of the victims or whatever that they set up here, these rambunctious teenagers from out of town who accidentally run over a kid and then just leave. They just leave.
Well, some of them had some heart. There were some ones staying there. But
I understand that, but the reasoning behind this is just nobody makes a human decision in this movie.
I feel like that happens a lot in a lot of horror movies where there's the teenagers are just too brutal and too.
But it's strikingly noticeable in this one because so much of it hinges on you at first being kind of mad at these teens for doing this. That
Right.
you're rooting along with the dad, but their decision seems stupid and his seems rushed and stupid.
Sure.
Even though they establish in the very first scene that as a kid he experienced, Pumpkinhead coming out for vengeance and his
Right.
dad not opening the door. It's a great first scene actually on a friend who's being chased on the run or whatever. But it feels like a fairy tale in all the wrong ways, in that, like, in fairy tales you don't have characters really. You have, set up archetypes. And each of these people feels like that. You've got the greaser who runs over the kid, who's literally a greaser in 1988.
absolutely getting a horrible name to Corvette drivers.
Yeah,
He
it
whips
just-
up on a vet and
Total
murders a
dingus.
child.
Total dingus. And he murders a child and then mentions that he previously had hit another kid. That's why he can't stay around. So
He's on
this guy's
probation or
just a
something?
shithead. Just a shithead. I don't know. The acting, I don't agree, honestly, Bluester, other than the witch, I think, was great, and and Lance Henriksen. I think most of them were really pretty shoddy.
I think the people that mattered were important. I mean, I don't know. My bar was really lowered after some movies.
Pumpkinhead, great acting on his part.
Compared, yeah, actually, yeah. He was,
the most
the way he
human
moved was
character,
so
the most
beautiful.
humanized character in the entire movie.
which was the freak show. But yeah, the fodder was questionable to say the least. So yeah,
So, what is this movie?
I don't know. I was gonna give my 2 cents by kind of saying that when I went into it, I was a bit confused because as a movie that I knew was directed by a makeup artist, and that was called Pumpkinhead, and I saw the DVD cover of this Pumpkinhead freak, I kind of went into it thinking it was gonna be your typical B horror movie, and I realized pretty quickly this movie was not made to be a B horror. It was
No.
it was made to be taken very seriously. So from
Right.
from the get go, I was a little bit kind of confused and torn.
That's kind of why I find it charming, though.
I liked it. Okay, I liked it for the first 30, 40 minutes. I was like, okay, I like this dad. I like his actor. I can get into this. But when I'm watching a movie by a makeup artist called Pumpkinhead, I can only go so long without seeing a Pumpkinhead.
Yeah, it takes an awfully long time to set him up.
Right.
Well, I mean, he looks so good, and I think they knew that was the best thing they had for this movie.
for sure.
And they wanted to save him, and I think that's smart. I think wait as long as you possibly can to really show your creature off. That's how you do it right.
They certainly
I think.
straddled the line there. And then when he came, I was like, okay, I like this. This thing is cool. And then there was a weird portion where he went away, and that's when I was like, okay, I'm done with this movie until this guy comes back.
Absolutely.
You've introduced Pumpkinhead, which
Yeah,
is why I
sure.
watched this movie, and now he's gone. Literally, I was counting the
Yeah.
seconds that he came back. I don't care about this story. I don't care about this ritual.
Yeah.
I don't care about these characters. You showed me Pumpkinhead, which is why I watched the movie. Bring that motherfucker back and make him snap another head.
Well, every time Pumpkinhead is introduced too, it's important to note here, there's just like strobe lights and wind blowing
Yes.
and this weird
That
like,
weird noise, yeah.
that sounds like it's taken straight from the Thing, actually.
It does. It sounds exactly like it. Yeah.
And like anytime he's introduced, so there's no element of tension to him showing up. It's just
No,
cut
there's
to
not.
Pumpkinhead and boom, he's there. And what I was most disappointed with is because this movie was always pitched to me as being a slasher movie of sorts. And
Right.
he does not do that, because this Thing, as impressive as it is in movement and in action, is not impressive. And he cannot kill anybody except by picking them up and jump cutting to them getting dropped on the ground. He picks up
Yeah,
and
that's
drops
true.
people repeatedly.
Let me interject very quickly, because first off, I loved the first time they did that, when they showed the shot of this chick maybe 50, 60 feet up in a tree, and I was like,
it's
what?
great.
And then he just drops her on a huge rock. I was like, you don't see that very often
that
in a
was
horror
Debbie
movie.
Raw.
And let me, again, at least very quickly, have a counter argument to that, because this is a point that I wanted us to say in a note that I made watching the movie. big ups to this movie because this is the only movie where I saw somebody get stabbed with a gun.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. That was pretty cool.
The irony behind that is so funny to me.
I'm sure they were laughing their asses
When
off.
I saw that, it was hilarious.
I think they simply couldn't get like the puppet or whatever Pumpkinhead was to pull a trigger on a gun. So they're like,
Maybe.
"Fuck it, how do we do this?"
Just
and
stab
they
him with it.
jam it into the gun.
I think it's more of a joke. Like Pumpkinhead has no idea what this is
Exactly,
or how to
right,
use
right.
it.
And when he picked up the gun, I was like, this is going to be hilarious when he like shoots this guy.
No,
And then he
Just stabs
him.
I remember that. I just
God.
lost my noggin when that happened. I was just
kidding
fucking
me?
crying.
Hey,
laughing.
there are a couple of interesting kills in this, but for the most part, they were really underwhelming to me. With the exception of, I like those two okay, but the exception of one where he picks up like a girl that he's already picked up and dropped or whatever he does, and he like puts her nearly dead face to the window and to
that
taunt
was
these other
awesome.
people, and then like kind of pushes her through it.
Yeah.
And it's a really cool little scene, and it seems so kind of unreal, and like she kind of becomes a puppet, which has this other level of interest because he's kind of a puppet. It's a cool little bit there, but for the most part, I was really underwhelmed with basically everything in this movie.
there was a solid 30 minutes where Pumpkinhead was just given hell, which was raising hell, which was great. And then again after that, there's a lull for some reason where they try to go back to the whole plot and back to the characters and back to the ritual where you're just like, okay, I need more Pumpkinhead.
Well, when they bring back that old like Hick family out in
Right.
the woods or whatever, that part is so boring.
Yes,
it's
it
so
sucked.
boring.
That's when I tuned out. I mean, I just tuned out and I was like, I'm gonna wait till I see this big orange monster on the screen again.
It's
because-
paced really poorly. There's some interesting bits that they do with how it's shot. It's really blue, it's really orange, it's washed out. But that gets annoying at a certain point because all of what you're seeing is in this really, really dark lighting, with the exception of, Pumpkinhead maybe being backlit. And that got really old to me because I just couldn't tell what the hell was going on. And maybe it was my Blu-ray copy or something, but I would have expected a better picture to it. And I just don't think it was all that well put together.
Yeah.
I had the same complaints, and I watched it on VHS, a VHS rip of it. So
Yeah.
I think this suffers the same. For me, I'm not a fan of B-horror, and I've said it. And I think it kind of suffers the same bane that a lot of B-horrors suffer. And let me explain. Like, if I see a movie called Slugs, and I see a movie called
Don't knock
Chud,
slugs.
and I see a movie called,
knock
Critters
Chud
or
either.
Trimmers, and I know going in it's a B-horror, and it's not going to be getting its credit from the acting or the direction or whatever, but it's going to be its credit from the title name. I better see a shitload of Slugs and Chuds.
Did you give
and
Trimmer?
Trimmers.
Did you give Trimmer shit?
No.
Trimmers
Okay,
is
I was gonna
amazing.
say-
Trimmers is a-
Let's
yeah.
not question.
Trimmers
Trimmers
is a
is
good
amazing.
example of
It's
it.
can
amazing.
we please do Tremor sometime?
I would love
Does
to.
that count as a
Yes,
horror
yes.
movie? I'm really hoping it does.
I
don't
wouldn't
know,
call
but
it, but I
love
think
it.
we
If we
can
I don't know
talk
what it
about
is,
it.
but I love it.
If we can watch I Saw the
We can
Devil,
do a creature feature one
Sure,
sometime.
yeah.
Yes, please.
But anyway, I
Yes.
did watch Chud last night, and that was my huge complaint: is that if you're a terrible movie called Chud with terrible acting,
Better see some
and terrible
Chuds.
script, there better be a shitload of Chuds,
Chuds in there.
and there wasn't, and it sucked.
Shitload of
And
chuds.
Pumpkinhead barely suffers that bane, in that it's a movie called Pumpkinhead, and I know I'm not going in to see fucking Best
there's-
Actor nominations.
And you're not gonna see. You're not gonna see any of those.
I'm not trying to see.
Not
that's
even Lance Henriksen.
George Clooney on screen. I just want to see Pumpkinhead
So-
raising hell.
One thing that I'm wondering though, Devin, is like something you always bring up is that you want to see a movie that takes itself seriously. You don't like the horror comedies. You don't like
Not really.
the
no.
cheesy B stuff. This movie does take itself incredibly
Really? Which is
Which is
seriously.
why I don't think it's a B
And-
movie, actually.
I don't either.
It's not a B movie.
But you can but like there's still so much charm to it in my opinion, and like it has this like fairy tale kind of thing that like Dylan said. And this might be going more into my like ultimate thoughts about this movie, but
Which is fine. Yeah.
it reminds me of Hellraiser, Nightmare on Elm Street, and that those movies have this like fairy tale feel to them.
For sure.
Especially like Hellraiser, where you've got this whole
Yeah.
mythos
You
built
buy
around
into
it.
mythology.
And then Pumpkinhead is the same thing. It starts out, it's got this, it sets up this like ancient backstory of Pumpkinhead. I find the movie to be very charming. But then again, I'm very into the whole like cheesy stuff. I love
It
that
is
kind of
charming. It is charming, and it is it's cheesy, but not in a B horror way that I generally don't like. That's why I tend to like this movie more than dislike it. I wouldn't call it a B horror. The only thing is I'm making similarities that it kind of suffers from the problems that a lot of B horrors do.
Right.
And that I'm not going in to see the story or the fairy tale as much as I am to see Pumpkinhead. And there was just not enough Pumpkinhead for me to have a complaint at least. But with that being said, I might just segue in because I've already pretty much said my thoughts on it. I think that it could use more Pumpkinhead, and I like the fairy tale. I like the story to an extent, and I love Pumpkinhead when he's on screen, so I would recommend it. I absolutely would recommend this movie, especially around Halloween time. But, again, it's not my most favorite movie in the world, but I would at least recommend it. It's fun to watch.
Is it? My ultimate way in here is that I would not recommend this one. I find it to be, not monumentally, I find it to be really disappointing. It's built up, even the movie itself builds itself up as something that it really doesn't ever achieve. And I can appreciate it for what it is. It's really a very amateur production. It's done by people who just kind of like the genre and have been serving in various other aspects of it. But to me, it's like if, I don't know, a bunch of lawyers got together and tried to start a restaurant. You know, they don't know what they're doing, really, and it shows. It's, I'm not knocking any lawyers or restaurateurs here, but it's just, it's amateurish in all the wrong ways for a movie that presents itself as something other than that. And I didn't find myself at any point actually really enjoying it, despite some bits that were kind of interesting. So, not a recommendation from me, but it is something that I think some people would really like. It's just not my cup of tea.
Let me just point out that I think it's hilarious that you said it was incredibly disappointing because it's directed by Stan Winston, a makeup artist. So I don't know what kind of high hopes you had.
I respect tremendously. I mean,
okay.
I don't know what I was expecting, but
hold your thoughts, because the movie he made after that is called A Gnome Called Norm.
Ooh, let's do that one.
GNORM.
Absolutely do that
A
one.
gnome named Norm, and the
Norm.
picture of this title is so funny. And he also did T2 3D, A Battle of Cross Time, which I'm not even sure what that is. I guess a Terminator 2 spin-off.
Gnome, thank you.
I don't even.
No,
Wow.
thank you. Oh my God,
I'm looking at this picture right now and I feel a little sick.
that's horrible.
Upworld.
So yeah, if you're looking for a solid directorial debut, don't look for
This
a
is not
makeup.
it.
Look elsewhere.
Don't look for a makeup artist or a special effects artist. Anyway, Dylan.
Well, before we get to Bluester, can I just say that the first user review for A Gnome Called Norm is no, it's not with a G. Go ahead.
Nothing like a user review to really round the evening off there. But yeah, I have to agree a lot with Dylan on Pumpkinhead and all of its various names that we gave it throughout this week. It was one of the
which we can't repeat.
It was one of the most unpredictable movies. So I had never had this movie talked up to me, and I didn't have any expectations going in. But just looking at the cover art, knowing the name, and just seeing some clips from it, I thought I was expecting to see an absolute, just jerk fest. I thought it was going to be silly. I thought it was going to be nonsensical, and I thought it was going to be funny. I thought it was going to be a pure B movie with some great effects. And in that regard, I was disappointed because the movie was very serious, and it excelled in some areas like effects. I thought the effects were way too good to be justified in this pile of garbage.
I agree, honestly.
I feel bad calling it a pile of garbage because it's not a bad, it's not the worst movie. It's not poorly made in every aspect, but it's just none of it got me.
Gelled.
None of it made me enjoy it, and
Yeah.
I found myself by the end of it just getting so bored.
There's
that
better ways to spend your time here.
Yeah, there are some great kills. Maybe you go YouTube those. I don't know. I mean, it was entertaining, and the effects are, no question. We can't knock those. They're a masterpiece. But I really wish they would have just put those in another movie with somebody who knew what they were doing. So
I agree entirely.
I feel kind of bad not recommending this movie because it is, beautiful in some regards, and it is well known. But I think you're much better off going to anything else, like Tremors, for instance.
So half and half there. 2 recommends, 2 non-recommends.
I'm sorry. Did
No,
you say?
I pretty much did, but yeah, I might be going against those two in that I do recommend the movie, but know what you're getting into. Yeah. I mean, it is kind of this like fairy tale, and it does have those elements of a B movie, but I don't know, it worked for me. And to be fair, like, I do have some nostalgia for this movie because I've seen it many times since I was young, so I have some kind of a bias, but I would recommend it. Screw you guys.
Yeah, it's fine. Stan Winston is rolling in his grave from my feedback. R.I.P., buddy.
Have some drinks and watch it around Halloween with some buddies.
I think it'd be all right then.
I think that if I had watched it in a group, I might have enjoyed it more. Because Kelsey and I just kind of watched it in my room, and we were kind of in the zone to watch something, and it just.
I watched it solo, fell asleep midway through, and had to continue it the next morning. It was.
Yeah, that's not the way to watch it.
I really have a feeling that in a group, few drinks, I think it could be pretty fun, honestly.
That's most of my experiences with this movie, so maybe that's why.
I don't know what it is about the horror genre. Just getting a group of dudes and just trash talking a film just really meshes well there.
Or getting scared, like, by the canal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Crying
with that
like
being
a
said,
baby.
I'm not afraid to admit that I cried in front of all my best friends because I was so scared.
No jokes were being made about this next movie, which is The Babadook.
Really? Were no jokes being made?
Well, it
Because-
started off that way, but I think everybody did
No.
shut up.
Everybody
That's a
shut
good
up pretty
sign.
quick, just the way the canal worked as well.
Well, I was talking about the name of the movie.
Well, the
but-
Babadook.
Before we
I think
ever
that's
even
silly.
hit the play button, so many disparaging names were made for that title that
Oh, man.
I think we can share Babadookie. I mean, that's just that's easy.
Baba Ganoush.
Baba Ganoush.
Babadook. Marmaduke.
Marmaduke.
A lot of Marmaduke references were thrown out there.
But all of those stopped because this is
This is a legit movie, so
Second the
let
movie
me
starts.
give you a synopsis of it. First off, The Babadook is an Australian ghost story film that just came out recently and got rave reviews
It's
from
96, right?
we're somewhere in the upper 90s right now on Rotten Tomatoes, and it got rave reviews at small film festivals, and it still isn't supposed to be released until November. I think they did a Halloween release for people. That's why we got to see it. And yeah, right now it's got remarkably high reviews on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. So of course we went in with pretty high expectations, and I think for the most part it did deliver. It's a movie about a recent widow, a woman who just recently lost her husband, and she's very young. Her husband was young. It was in a car crash, and she's only survived by their son. So she, in a way, is almost literally being haunted by her husband's recent death. And there's the whole complexities of whether she felt like her son should have died as well, and the fact that she's a single mom now, and how much she misses her husband in her life. And eventually the son clings on to a fairy tale type character named the Babadook, which is a children's story that is found on its bookshelf. That
utterly horrifying children's story.
Yes.
One of the scariest looking books I've ever
Neither of them were aware of existed, but he picked it out. They read it, and it was obviously a very dark and utterly terrifying fairy tale, as Dylan put it. So they have to stop reading it. The mom obviously is keen enough to realize it's not worth reading to her son, and then essentially the son obsesses over it for the rest of the film, and it begins to trickle into the life of the mother as well. So with that being said, if somebody wants to kick off the discussion on it.
So to build off what Devin was just saying, I thought that was a really good description, and the book is the kicking off point, because it kind of depicts some of the scenes that happen later on in the movie. Mm-hmm. So the book is really integral in that part, not just because of the son's infatuation with the character and this mythical, horrifying figure, and you're kind of constantly being checked and asked, like, is this real? Is it in the kid's head? Mm-hmm. And I feel like, I don't know, I really appreciate movies like that and The Canal that really kind of let me think about it and let me kind of draw my own conclusions. So
there's an awful lot of similarities in this one.
For
to The Canal, really.
It is really weird like that.
And I think it's why both of them worked very well for me. And like Blutzer was saying when we reviewed The Canal, it feels like a better executed Jacob's Ladder. I would argue that this is the same one, or the same way. Jacob's Ladder, is, if you're familiar with it, is widely considered kind of a forgotten classic in the horror genre. And I like it a lot, but I think that it relies too much on imagery that is only in a very few parts of the movie. It's really inconsistent.
I thought they kind of dropped the ball on that. They had some great setup, and when they did show it, my God, it was traumatic. Yeah. I think that just like, do it more, man.
But I think in both of the cases of The Canal and the Babadook, these are just much better paced.
Yeah, I agree.
And the number one thing that I have to praise the Babadook on is how well it was paced, because it is truly a descent into madness in this one.
I would agree.
And it clicks on a lot of different levels. One thing that's worth mentioning is this book that we say that she finds and tries to get rid of several times actually is somewhat supernatural. It looks like a really twisted, like even more twisted Edward Gorey book with these really kind of charcoal drawings, and it's horrifying.
I would spend big bucks on that actual book.
It's really scary.
Beautiful.
But it's really unnerving, and the creature design is top notch. I haven't seen a creature this unique in a very long time. And it's just really simple too.
Simple and terrifying.
For some reason, the creature really reminded me of like a scarecrow. And there's a couple scenes where they kind of put him in a situation that was very much like what you would expect from like a real scarecrow. And I don't want to give anything away, but I feel like the creature figure, at least in my mind, ties closely to some of the other characters in the movie, you could say. And I feel like it was almost a representation of...
It is. It's hinted in a
For
couple
sure.
of places.
Okay. I thought it was really great the way they incorporated that into the actual creature, and I don't know, it just added that extra depth there. I don't know.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier that the kid, or maybe I did, that the kid has some kind of psychological issues going on, and that's...
Major.
Yeah, that's what makes this relationship for the mom and her son so difficult. And then you kind of start to realize, wait a second, maybe there's a chance that the mother is also dealing with something similar. And that's where this whole thing comes in. That's a very common theme in movies, where you start wondering what is real and what isn't. What's in the characters' heads and what's not. And this one plays that line just masterfully and terrifyingly at that.
It's worth mentioning this kid because we talked about in the canal that the child actor in the canal is really good.
Right.
That a lot of it hinges on him, and he's he just does a really great job there. This child actor I loathed,
Really?
but I
thought
think
he
you're
was-
supposed to,
Okay.
and I think he does the actor's great.
Yeah, I thought he did a really good job. I made this comment while watching the movie. I wonder if he's just like that much of a brat in real life.
Exactly.
Because he's almost too good at being a
But he
little
switches
shit.
it up there. There's a point where in the movie he switches
and
up.
that's kind of where you can tell like this
Yeah.
kid, he did a really good job. He doesn't tear you out of it like a lot of kids do.
So if you're watching it and you start getting pissed at him at the beginning, just realize that's the intent.
And
that
you
does
definitely, I
switch
feel
around
like
some.
you're, and this is actually something that I wrote down. I feel like the first half of the movie is very sympathetic towards the mother, especially for me. Like I just felt so bad for the mom in the movie. Like I don't know, I really felt for her. And then there's a hard shift, and you guys might know where it is, where she takes the kid to the doctor. From that point on, it's almost as if the movie switches perspectives.
Loved it.
Yeah.
And you see like this kid's perspective where you're being reminded of your own childhood, where sometimes you would see your parents, they were upset, you didn't understand why. And this was the same thing with the kid. He still loves his mom, but he doesn't understand why she's acting like she's acting. And it's almost like two different perspectives in the movie. The first half is kind of the mom's perspective, the second half is kind of the kid's. And it did a really good job at that.
Can I say, speaking of the mom's acting,
Oh wow.
unbelievable.
great, yeah.
I think, no joke, it was some of the most top tier acting I've seen in a horror movie in my entire life.
Especially because of how dynamic she was. Like,
She was
Yep.
incredibly
She's
dynamic, and to the quality that could and should receive actual awards at some sorts of festivals or whatever, because that was unreal.
I hope this movie gets big enough to the point where she gets recognized,
For sure.
because this is something that
She
that she
deserves
deserves accolades for.
Something on kind of that same vein was those scenes where she would lay down, go to sleep,
Oh,
and then
man.
like that, for some reason, those stressed me out so
Those
much.
transitions were brilliant.
It was so good. She would it did such a good job of showing you how little sleep she was getting, how bad her sleep was, and
Right.
just how much she was falling apart. And like lately, I just have been sleeping so awfully. So seeing that was like so real. Just watching her lay down, and you see her face. It becomes daytime. Her face is exactly the same as when she laid down. It was great.
It was just gone in like an instant.
Yeah.
And they would do the same kind of thing where instead of her actually sleeping, she would just zombie out and watch TV.
In front of TV. Those are
Yep.
some of the most horrifying
Those are
scenes in the movie.
scary, scary images on that TV, I'm telling you.
That's the thing. A lot of the things that actually get you in the mood in this movie and get you scared
They're not
aren't
jump scares.
really
They're
scary
not
at all.
directly scary.
No.
In any other context, they wouldn't be scary, but it's something about the color palette they use.
Cartoons, the black and white.
I think the other thing that we need to give huge props to here is the sound design, which I
Oh,
know Blutzer and I were both
absolutely.
immediately talking about this.
Right.
It is wow. I mean,
Terrifying.
we really praised the Canal sound design, and I still stand by that. I still think that has great sound design
sure.
as well. But this is honestly some of the best horror sound design I've seen. The noise that the creature makes is, oh my
Yeah,
god!
That was really good.
But besides just that, it's everything else. It's the shrillness of the kid. It's the just the kind of pitch changes in the mother and how
Sure,
she deals
yes.
with things, and it's how the level of safety is kind of hinted to you by the sound design.
I agree.
And at kind of some dramatic pitches and shifts too. But it works brilliantly throughout.
Dylan, I'm so glad you brought up the sound, just because for me, between the very shifting natures of the mom and the kid, like not only are the actors unpredictable and the characters themselves hard to follow, not hard to follow, but
Intentionally.
you can't predict what's going to happen,
Right.
because that's part of the unnerve. But the audio does such a good job of not like telling you, okay, in 30 seconds there's going to be a scary scene, or there's going to be a shift in tone. Like, it kind of follows them. It's almost like the audio is added over the acting, just because it does such a good job of breaking it up for you and making it so disorienting that you kind of fall into the scary scenes and fall into the fear almost naturally. It was so scary for me.
Yeah, I wish we could go into it more without spoiling things.
It's really hard to talk about this movie without spoiling a lot of the key things.
I'll just say that Dylan and I, we had like an epiphany days after watching it that was so cool and interesting.
Oh my god, it changes the movie.
And it changes a lot, and we can discuss this off podcast.
I want to hear this.
Yeah.
No, I think we talked about it too a little bit.
Well, what I was talking about with Man, so when we watched this movie the first time, I was a little intoxicated.
For sure.
And I kind of...
A little, yeah.
Which is why I had to watch it twice, so, I apologize.
Glad you did.
I had to watch it twice, because I remember even in my drunken stupor that it was a masterpiece. But I just remember waking up, and I was listening to Devin give his, last movie, final end of the movie analysis, and I was just like, damn, man, everything he's saying right now is so smart. And I was just like,
you must have been drunk.
This guy knows what he's talking about. And it really clicked with me, and I still actually believe what Devin was talking about, but I'm very curious to hear what your all's kind of
we changed a little bit.
It's a little bit separate from that, bit.
Okay, I'm really curious to hear that.
Well, we should probably shut up about that if we're not going to talk about
spoilers,
it.
One thing that I will say about this movie is that I wasn't initially terribly scared afterwards. I was like, oh, that was a really good movie. I'm glad I watched it. That night, I could not sleep with my closet door open because I was so pants-pissingly scared.
I was terrified.
And it's not that it does anything that's outwardly really freaky or scary. It just sticks with you. It's a lingering movie.
It just is scary.
It sticks with you so well because it has one of those very awkwardly happy / dark endings that you're not sure how to feel about it. It was very similar to The Orphanage in that way, except maybe less happy. I don't know.
This movie's a brilliant mix of The Canal and The Orphanage.
Yeah,
I
agree with you.
Two movies I love tremendously, and this one it mixes both of them perfectly.
One of the things I want to say, just kind of to the acting, to the sound, and to the whole feel. Like, for me, the movie was overall scary. There wasn't necessarily any takeaway scenes. I feel like if you removed any major 10-minute chunk, the movie would kind of lose a significant piece, and I feel like that's because of the pacing. But for me, like, the color palette and the way it was shot and the way the actors worked together with each other and the sound, all of it together has this package that, to me, is beautiful. It's a masterpiece.
It's weird that you mentioned the color palette. I almost remember this movie in black and white for some reason.
It is very weird
because
like that.
It's not in black and white. The movie is in color, and really well developed color. But the kind of the color palette it uses is so monochromatic.
It's very muted.
That's a very
that I remember the movie in black and white.
Bizarre point,
really
because
odd.
I think of it the exact same way you. That's really strange because it is very monotone, and they also, not to mention, there's a lot of black and white footage in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The story itself, the fairy
monster
tale
itself.
book, the monster is black and white. The book is pretty much black and white. That's very interesting, and it kind of adds to that very dreadful tone and the sense of dread and dark sadness, and it really does work.
I think the color palette basically gives you this perfect segue to whenever we do have creature scenes, because he is in black and white, and the movie isn't in black and white, but you're ready for it when it happens.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like
He
an
doesn't
odd...
stick
Not
out.
a weird contrast, right?
He just blends right in. You're like, damn, this guy's scary as shit. He's just right up in there.
It really is absolutely terrifying.
But and that's
My
the weird thing is
God.
that you don't really see the monster all that much.
Not much.
I mean, even in the scenes where he is in front of the camera, you don't see much
Very
of him.
tasteful.
In a movie called Babadook, I want to see the Babadook.
Hey,
I gotta
it's
see
like
more
Chud. I need
Babadook
more
puppets.
Chuds. I need more Babadooks.
I need to see 100 chuds.
Legendary director.
100 Chuds, 100 Babadooks.
Very different
Before we
movie,
go
to be
too
fair.
far off the end, I just want to say that for me, I don't know if it's because of like my childhood or my developing years, but for me, half of the movie's scare factor, not half, but even almost more so than the actual creature of the Babadook, was the mom.
Yeah.
Movies like Black Swan and
Yes.
the Babadook,
Yeah,
they have
definitely.
very very terrifying mother figures.
Transformations and
Yeah, you have that evolution, and for me, the mother figures really add another layer of fear. It's like, not only do you fear your guardian, right, this person that's taking care of you that you're entrusted to, but that takes you off tilt because you don't know if you can trust her. And then on top of that, you have this, maybe it's a symbol for like otherworldly fears, like outside of your home. But
it's a terrifying entity, whatever it is.
for me, it was just the mother combined with everything
Well,
else.
you know
just
what,
doubled the
Dylan?
scare factor.
Brandon, I was actually about to wrap up, but you just brought a point that's so poignant, especially considering we were just mentioning Candyman. And the major theme of Candyman is that these urban legends are created so that people can attribute their daily life fears and concerns and struggles to an urban legend to kind of cope with it better. And my God, if that's not the Babadook, I don't know what is.
It's entirely possible to read this movie as not supernatural at all.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I just love about it.
I didn't want to get into that because I didn't want to. I don't know if that's spoiling anything, but yeah, I agree.
I think it's
I
up
don't
to
know that it
the
does
user,
necessarily. It is
up to the viewer.
and it's up to you through the entire movie, really.
For sure.
Yeah.
But that is a great connection. And I was going to compare it to Candyman earlier because we were just talking about Candyman before the podcast. And I feel like it's very similar in that. But let's go ahead and wrap it up. I think we can all agree that Marmaduke, 10 out of 10. Check it out. Owen Wilson.
The CGI dog. Yeah,
Was
it's
it
great
Owen
creature
Wilson?
design.
Who was it?
I choose to believe that it was.
Or am I thinking of Marley and Me?
Oh, Marmaduke, how dare you?
I didn't know that this movie was made.
Where would you eat the sandwich
There was
for,
a
Marmaduke?
There was a
I know.
Marmaduke movie. Anyway, Brandon, you were just finishing up. If you want to go ahead and kick it off with your
Sure. My recommendations, whether I would recommend it or not. So, obviously, you kind of heard me gushing about the movie. I think there's a lot of great elements, acting, color. I don't know what it is about color palettes in movies and, like, texture, but that stuff really gets me. So, you had great overall ambience, great sound, great acting, cool creatures, which I think was great. But one of the things that really makes me think about this movie well after I've watched it now twice is just kind of like Candyman, all the different themes that it goes over. You have, like, the fears of a single parent, like troubled children, mother figures and guardians is kind of demonizing or tormenting like the people that they have to take care of. I don't know, a lot of those things really were very dark to me and made me really kind of think back to my past. And so I absolutely have to recommend this movie just because it's scary for one, terrifying, it's beautiful, and it makes you think. So that's mine.
Right.
This one unequivocally gets a mention for me. This is absolutely a recommendation. I'm really curious to see what the director, Jennifer Kent, I think this is her first film.
It might be,
She wrote it too. I'm really curious to see what she'll do next.
I hope she
and I
goes
think
far.
she's gonna be hot stuff soon because this is a hell of a way to make a calling card. I would not only recommend it, I'd actually recommend watching it multiple times because I'm about to go back and watch it a second time.
Yeah.
Because of how many layers I think this thing has. And if knowing a little bit about where it goes tells me a little bit about where it was going in the first place. Mm-hmm. But great movie, absolutely great.
Yeah, subsequent viewings are just make it that much better.
Yeah.
I got a very strange way to review it, and I'm trying to choose my words carefully. This movie is going to be very, very well liked and well reviewed by non-horror movie fans. And rightfully so, but there is a part of me that's a little bit bothered by the fact that there are so many movies that I would think that are as good or better that are not going to receive half the praise.
I agree.
And appreciation of this movie. Not to say it shouldn't get it; it definitely should. But people are acting like this is the first well-rounded, great horror movie to come out of the woodwork in the past 30 years, which is unfair. And I'll go ahead and use as an example again The Canal. I feel like should be getting just the same amount of praise and appreciation as this movie, but there's something about the Babadook was there on the right time of the right day at the right film festival, and it's getting all the deserved praise and appreciation it should get. But for some reason, it just bothers me when like critics and people just choose one horror movie every 10 years. It seems like to just gush over.
I see what you're saying, Devin, but I don't disagree with this one getting the praise.
I don't at all.
I think it's well deserved.
That's why I'm trying to be careful with what I say. It does deserve it, but it kind of has the same feeling as Cabin in the Woods did for me, where, yes, that was great, I liked it, but really, like, is that the only good movie that's come out in the past 20 years out of the horror genre? So, with that being said, this movie was amazing, and don't read into the 96% on Rotten Tomatoes in the reviews as this movie is leaps and bounds better than every horror movie you've ever seen recently, because that's the kind of the way I went into it, even though I tried not to. And although I wasn't let down, it still was a little bit distracting and jarring going in with this pristine review from everyone. This movie is fantastic. It's great, but don't go in thinking it's going to be the best movie ever made. With that being said, I highly recommend it. It really is a great movie, but you may not be, if you go in with the wrong mindset. If you go in with incredibly high expectations, I just would be worried that you could be a little bit disappointed. But it is a great movie. It's fantastic, so I recommend it highly.
Antron?
So I think I probably liked this movie the least out of you guys.
See, there's kind of my point.
Yeah, and I was expecting you, Devin, I was expecting you to also gush over this. I have nothing but good things to say about this movie, and I think it's a good movie, but it's not, to me, a great or amazing movie. And, sort of opposite of Brandon, I don't think I'll remember this movie a month from now.
It's fair.
I don't know. It
surprises me.
I liked the first half especially. And I almost found that grounded first half to be more interesting. Once it started delving into the more paranormal aspects, I kind of lost some interest, and I don't know. It didn't really do it for me 100%. I would still recommend the movie. I think it's very good. But it's not, in my opinion, great. It's not amazing. I don't know. I don't think it's going to stick with me.
And that's fair. I think it depends on kind of your mindset, on your approach to it.
Yeah.
It's still a recommend.
And again,
for me,
although
but-
I do disagree with Matt, and he did just epitomize my fear, which is that people will go in with a certain expectation and be, in a way, let down a little bit. Because, man, those reviews... I mean, that movie was terrific, but a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes is scarily high for a horror movie. No pun intended.
Oh, God.
No pun intended.
To be fair, though, I knew nothing about this movie.
Okay, good.
Unlike a lot of the other movies you watch, I didn't see a single review. I knew nothing. All I knew was the name Babadook, which did give me different expectations, but the only thing I knew was that it did take itself seriously. So I went in basically completely blind, and it wasn't quite there for me. And that might just be the fact that, this, like you said, is their first film. Maybe it wasn't exactly how they wanted it to be. Maybe it didn't turn out perfectly. I don't know. For me, it didn't do exactly what I wanted it to do.
So that's 3 strong recommends, and a weaker recommend, I guess.
Weaker recommend.
It still sounds like a pretty strong recommend.
Yeah, it still is. I would still recommend the movie.
It's good to have that word of caution, though.
But anyway, well, let's just make it simple. 4 recommendations. Go see this movie. It's worth watching for sure.
At the very least, support the director.
Right.
Just to see what she does in the future.
It's scary. It's good. You can make your own decisions after that. So let's round out.
Speaking of good movies.
Yeah.
Oh, God, no.
Let's round it out. And who is the one who has the honor of describing this?
I didn't even watch it, so.
That would be Bloodster. Let me just take a breath. Deep breath. Okay, so I, Brandon, have the misfortune of introducing Last House on the Left, Wes Craven's debut film.
Right.
And I'm going to do my best to start this off objectively.
That's why we gave it. This is why we gave it to you, actually.
And not go too off the rails.
We're very interested in hearing this.
Because when I saw this movie, I'll get into that later. I don't want to set you up just now. So let's start with the plot. What's this movie about? So like we said,
what is this movie about?
What is this gem about? So we got Last House on the Left. You may or may not have seen the remakes, heard reference to this movie. It is relatively famous.
Let me interject already, because Last House on the Left is a hilarious title in that it has absolutely zero, nothing to do with the movie. There's no house.
I didn't think about that.
There's no house on the left.
I was always wondering about that.
Seriously, that's what you wondered about? That was the biggest misstep.
Again,
the title.
I didn't watch the movie. So.
My point is, we haven't even gotten past the title, and we already have some issues. But continue.
Okay, so let's talk about what we do have in the film. There's no houses. Just kidding. There's some. Have nothing to do with the street. Anyway, so we start out. We have some young teens. They're very nubile. They're just virginal. They're starting their youth, and I think we're in the 70s, if I remember correctly, early 80s.
72.
You can
70s.
definitely tell there's some strong 70s vibes. It's pretty sweet. It's very rooted in its decade. These teens are trying to get out there, go into some parties. I think they're going to a concert. As they're driving to get some goods for the concert, they hear on the radio that I think some criminals escaped from jail, or they were put out on parole. I don't remember what the situation was, but somehow some horrific criminals were released from jail. Straight from that, we jump cut into a room with 4 random people we've never met, and I think we're led to believe that they are those criminals. And basically, shortly thereafter that jump cut introduction that doesn't really introduce those characters, we see them run into our 2 main female protagonists, I guess.
Right.
And it kind of sets off the journey that kind of ultimately sets the whole plot in motion, and ultimately gets us to the end where there's some some pretty big twists and some unexpected characters that kind of come in to play a bigger role than I would have ever guessed.
Is it too much for us to spoil this movie? Because I feel like everybody knows what this movie is.
I don't feel like this movie deserves any
this
credit
movie-
at
what's
all.
the
Spoilers. I mean,
the parents at the end.
Yeah.
I'm
Like,
trying
even I
not-
know that and I didn't watch the movie.
whatever. I mean,
I'm trying not to give away anything.
I'm not
trying
even
to be
worried
very
about
fair.
that. And here's the thing. This is a very, very awkward one to review because, shockingly, for us at least, this movie is very well revered by a lot of
Can't.
lot of people who
Neckbeards?
love the genre
I don't get it.
and will follow someone like Wes Craven, into
To his grave.
Yeah, to his grave.
This is the perfect exorcism-esque movie. Like, yeah, dude, The Exorcism is great
Exorcist.
because that's what I...
Exorcist. We keep doing that.
That's pretty
I don't
embarrassing
even
on our
care.
part, but we clearly don't care that much.
Hey, we're not buffs. Yeah.
We're not buff. We haven't heard of that movie.
But yeah, like I feel like this movie suffers from the Exorcist syndrome, where people hear it's a great movie, they go into it, they probably didn't even watch it when they had it on the TV, and they immediately go to IMDb and they just slap the 9-star rating on it. Like, absolutely, is it a masterpiece? Oh, definitely. Is it
And
hard to
yeah,
watch? Oh,
it's just like
definitely.
heaven forbid if people were admitted that maybe this guy's first movie
Is
sucked.
complete garbage.
Wow.
Pile of
I mean,
schlock.
can we just move past it? Yes, he made a shitty movie, his first movie, and then went on to make terrific movies.
Well, a few.
Well, sure.
mean-
But is that the
And an awful lot
craziest
of
thing?
not good
Is that the biggest pill for horror movie fans to swallow? That
The
maybe
first
this,
movie doesn't have to be the
it
best.
doesn't have to be great, and it certainly was not, in our opinion. No, not even. I'm gonna say, objectively, this movie is bad,
It's garbage.
and it to the point where I'm offended. I'm almost offended and insulted when I listen to or read reviews where people speak highly of it.
I want to meet these people because I genuinely am curious to have them talk with me. It's like
Like
with
an actual
Man.
conversation.
It's like with Man and Deadly Premonition. Like, I respect Man's opinion, and I really want to know why this game is as good as he says it is. Just like this movie is so highly revered that I want to know why someone would give it an 8. Because I personally was offended watching the movie. I thought it was bad on so many different levels, and it was so offensive for no.
It was
good reason.
confused. That's the
Yeah,
adjective that I came up with. It was confused.
That's a
The
good word.
movie itself?
Then the movie is
Director,
confused.
the actors, the
the
entire
actors,
movie.
definitely the actors were confused in that movie.
This movie is so confusing and disorienting because no one has any idea what they're doing, Wes Craven included.
No,
I gotta
Wes Craven had no idea what he was doing.
I gotta say, again, I didn't even watch this movie, but having watched the preview, which is actually pretty infamous in its own right, it's the,
Is it?
keep telling yourself it's only a movie.
Oh, right. okay.
well,
Even
I
that
know.
preview, the
It's so
actors in
funny.
that just seem like they are on drugs. They probably are.
I wouldn't be
But they,
surprised.
nothing about it seems masterfully done, even from a preview. And if you can't get a good
No.
preview out of it, even in the 70s, which is rough for previews,
Right.
I don't know.
We kind of looked into Wes Craven and the timeline of this movie. He was 22 years old when he made this movie. Around 22 years old, and I think that kind of shows he was
Yeah.
trying to make a shocking movie and make a name for himself, and the movie is shocking, and I don't mean that as a compliment.
Shockingly bad.
Exactly.
It makes you feel disgusting. Like, there's so many movies where bad things happen to people and bad things happen to good people, but in this movie, it takes it to this humiliation level that just makes you feel dirty while you're watching it, and so it's hard to enjoy the revenge at the end of the movie because it just gets way too heavy for the silliness that happens in between it too. The tone shifts in this
Again,
movie are so jarring.
This movie doesn't know what it is, and
Yeah.
we can just say outright, there's just several rape scenes which are just not shocking in a way that a director would want it to be shocking, but more just embarrassing and awkward to
uncomfortable.
watch.
This is the reason that I chose not to watch the movie. They kept saying, you've got to watch this piece of shit with us. I mean, that's literally what they were saying. So I was like, yeah, it's a great way to sell that. But I knew that, the crux of this movie revolves around these two rapes.
Rape and
I
torture.
it's something I have a really hard time watching in movies. And if it is basically the essence of that movie, I chose to pass.
It's pretty much
on this.
it's
to
the
even-
first half for sure,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to watch it either, really. To be
And it
honest
wasn't
with
even
you.
done in a way that I was wanting to to see what else happens. It wasn't engaging. It wasn't cool. It was boring rape. I mean, it was just.
Gosh.
I mean, I don't know what
the least zestful rape scene.
I'm just trying so hard not to compliment this movie in any way, because a lot of people will be like, well, if it made you feel uneasy and it made you feel uncomfortable, it did its job.
Well,
no, it was stupid.
Does it? Because the rapes in it kind of hinge on the revenge that happens later. Does it feel justified in that sense?
No.
That was, like I was saying earlier, that was one of the most discordant and stilted connections I've ever seen.
It was terrible. That was one of the biggest bangs of the movie, is that the revenge, quote unquote,
was.
It just wasn't.
Made no sense.
It didn't make sense,
and it gets too slapstick for the first half of the movie. Like it's like he has no idea what he's trying to do other than be shocking.
For sure.
And there's a lot of movies in that time period that did that, but like
Texas Chainsaw,
but Texas Chainsaw is actually really fucking good.
It's perfect. Yeah.
I just don't know what to say about this movie.
I think Matt set it up well earlier when he said this is a 22-year-old Craven, because if you pull back and look at this movie for exactly what it is, a 22-year-old first director in the 70s, it has everything you'd want. Just a perverse little boy putting naked women on screen, getting abused, drugs, and violence. Like, that pretty much checks all of the 22-year-old Wes Craven's boxes, I'm sure. It had everything he wanted.
Sure.
It feels like an immature fantasy.
It really absolutely is, which makes it all the more uncomfortable because, like, in other movies where there's these awful things, for instance, even in I Saw the Devil, like, there's reasons that they kick off. Maybe it's a psychopath, he sells it, whatever. But in this movie, there feels like there's no damn good reason why any of this stuff has to happen. And none of the actors seem to know why either, and they're just being abused on screen, and then we cut it and put it out there.
Does it feel kind of like a snuff film, but like a really poorly executed one?
Well, that's the thing. There's scenes where they do that, and then, no joke, it'll clip to two silly, dinky, like Three Stooges cops with, no joke, ridiculous slapstick, like ding, ding,
it's
ding,
so
ding,
inappropriate.
Ding, ding. There was literally a scene where they were chasing this woman through the woods trying to rape her, where I turned to my friend and said they could put on the Benny Hill theme right now and it would be perfect. Because they're chasing this chick through the forest for literally, I want to say, 5 minutes.
Yeah,
which
long.
is so long when you're watching it.
She's just
and it's like they're coming out of one area, and then she's coming out of another one, and then she's across the river. And I was like, right now, can we cue in the and like it would have fit it perfectly, because it was just like slapsticky and silly, and it, again, confused. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel like this is crazy and funny and bizarre, or this is scary and shocking.
None of it felt intentional at all.
It's just fucking gross. Like, my thing is, if you're gonna make a movie that's disgusting and gross that makes you feel bad, at least like teach me something. Like
I Saw the Devil.
Well, yeah,
I don't
even
agree.
I don't even think I Saw the Devil does that in a good way. But I guess what I'm getting at is, like, if you want to show a movie to me about the depravity of humanity and like how fucked up people can be, then do that. This movie doesn't do that. It's almost like he thought he was doing that, but does not do that in any way. It just is silly while simultaneously making you feel disgusting, pretty much.
So how did he get any other movies made after making this?
I think
because
it's shock
somebody thought
value.
it was good.
I think that the movie
People probably saw it.
People probably went and saw it. Yeah,
The man's
exactly.
right. That people's biggest arguments for this movie was that, oh, well, it's a theme of showing that evil is out there, and that all humans are inherently evil, and that's just the most pathetic, terrible, like, excuse for.
Like,
I think this is a poor justification.
Yeah,
like,
why?
it was made up.
Why try to justify the shit in this movie? Just say Wes Craven was 22 years old. He didn't understand the implications of the content that he was putting in this movie, and it's fucked up and gross, and he was just young and stupid.
At the end of the day, there's no justification for it either. That's the sickest.
There's two more points that I wanted to be more, that I wanted to talk about on how confused and just ridiculous inane this movie is. Again, I want to reiterate, we haven't talked about this. The music was so confused to where it would be a very dark and scary, like, rape scene and with like creepy music, and then would literally clip into a joke, like clown music, like you're watching a 70s like a sitcom almost, like a 70s.
He's not exaggerating. This is true. And there's lots of scenes where they forgot to put the music in, so you're just literally watching a dead silent scene of 4 people standing around a woman be raped, and she's not fighting it at all. Just like,
and it's just boring and awkward.
it is one of the most uncomfortable and offensive movies I've ever seen.
It
And
was clear that like even probably the actors probably felt uncomfortable,
Yeah. You
can
or they
see
just
it.
were confused about what this movie was.
There was also to like be like a cherry on top. There was literally a scene. I told you about that. We talked about this funny music that they play. There's literally a scene where the two cops were goofing off and the music stopped, and then it started for 1 second, goes ding ding, and then I was like, wait, what the hell was that? And then like 10 seconds later, the music actually did cue on. So they like started the music unintentionally on accident and had to cut it off real quick, and for some reason couldn't go back and edit it out.
and stuff
like
like
a
that can be
film.
that kind of stuff can be charming and fun when your movie isn't complete trash.
No, dude, that
otherwise.
was like straight up like boom in the shot type like material,
but-
like people like getting hit
That's
with
the thing,
boom
this
lights in the
isn't- and-
face. It was.
I wish this movie was that
I wanna-
half-hearted and silly.
I want to
really
point out
wish it
that this
was.
isn't a movie that's like so bad that you could go in and chuckle at it. That's the
No.
problem. I love watching bad movies.
Yeah, me too.
I'm a huge fan of like bad movies, B movies, and like I love watching shitty movies. I just love it. This movie, there is nothing to enjoy in this movie.
There's nothing to grab onto that makes you want to come back.
And it's not just enjoying either. If we're talking about horror, it just I felt worse off having watched this movie.
From the sound of it, I worry about it because when I went to the video store and I debated picking this one up, I'm glad that they didn't have it in stock because that was kind of
You got lucky.
the final straw where I was like, yeah, you know what, don't
went
really care.
to Blockbuster Video, asked them for.
I mean,
last-
No, it's Wild and Woolly, but
Okay.
but they had it for sale there. Like I saw that and I was like, I'm sure as shit not buying this movie after I know what it's about, but like they had it for sale there, and I really truly do worry about the kind of people who have deluded themselves to the point where they will buy and repeatedly watch a movie like this.
Ugh.
I'm telling you, I really genuinely want to meet these people, and I want them to sit down with me and tell me what it is that they value in this movie and what it is they see. Because I don't know if it's my own bias. As much as I love violence and awful movies that just show humans being mutilated,
Love it.
this movie was. I mean, let's just be honest.
Yeah,
Horror movie
I know,
has
we're-
lots of
we're
gore
all
and
like-
violence. I mean, I'm pretty much desensitized to that. But this movie didn't have any of those things. It wasn't gory.
It wasn't worth watching.
It was extremely inappropriate
And
for no damn reason.
For sure, and I don't even want you guys to accidentally give credit to it. It's not inappropriate or disturbing in a way that's entertaining or that
Justified.
you'd like or justified.
No.
It's just boring and silly and stupid and
Creepy.
the very, very sloppy, poorly done revenge aspect that they try to slap on at the end is beyond terrible. It's just so unconvincing.
Just as
And
undirected
I don't
as the
give a
fucking
damn. I'm
director.
going to spoil it. These parents find their
Yeah,
dead
fuck it.
bodies. They find their daughter's dead carcass, as well as I guess the friend, and realize that she's been raped and whatnot. And then it's like this revenge aspect kicks in, but it seems like they get over
Yeah.
this thing so quickly that within literally minutes, it's like they forgot that their daughter was raped and killed. It's
Well,
not like
it almost wasn't that. It was almost just that they so easily fell into, oh man, this is too bad. Let's murder these
Exactly.
guys. Like it just was so casual.
It
It
was
wasn't
so
convincing. This is
casual.
literally like a white, just middle-aged,
Yeah.
middle-income family that has no other justification to do it other than Wes Craven said, "You're going to do that at the end. Okay, just do it."
there was like no gasps, no tears, no nothing, and it was just like exactly what Manton said. Oh well, shit, she's dead. Better murder these guys. And
That sounds logical.
no emotion at all, and then it was unbelievable. And I will say on one tiny positive note, there was little tiny flashes of Wes Craven brilliance that eventually he's able to
Dial himself back.
dial himself back. There's maybe one or two scenes where I was like, okay, this is creepy, this is Wes Cravenish. This 3 minutes is what people might like about this movie, but other than that,
God.
This little blip.
So,
irredeemable.
yeah, I mean, if you had to recommend or not recommend, can you clarify this for our audience, just in case?
Well, in case you guys missed the earlier part of this podcast, it got Stinker of the Year. So yeah, I recommend it highly, guys, for
This is
sure.
good shit. Loved it.
No, yes, this movie literally is on my Stinker of the Year. It's a classic too. It's a Wes Craven movie. Wow, what a shock. It is one of the worst horror movies I've seen to date. I highly don't recommend it. Please avoid this movie at all costs.
Man,
This movie sucks butts. I don't like it.
short and sweet.
Eloquent.
There we go.
Blitzer?
I just really quickly want to say two things that could be seen and viewed as positive of this movie. I think this movie probably was one of the early revenge movies.
Sure.
I can't cite any other examples, and I don't want to even trick anyone into believing that they should go watch this movie just for that. And there was some pretty cool camera work early on, very guerrilla. I kind of appreciated it. But yeah, no sense in beating around the bush. This movie is complete garbage. It's absolute schlock. Wes Craven had no idea what the shit he was doing. He couldn't direct his actors, couldn't direct his music, couldn't direct anything in that movie other than it's straight into the toilet because it was a stinky fucking turd. Do not watch this movie ever if you respect yourself as a human being.
Well,
Damn.
I'm going to dissent and say that... No, actually, I haven't seen this movie, but I'm also going to say, fuck it, don't watch it.
Yeah.
It sounds terrible.
I think immature is the best word
Yes.
to use because I think the word immature in regards to every aspect of that movie.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I didn't
It
watch
feels
this
like a
You're lucky though.
a
I'm
child's
jealous.
idea of a scary movie, and that's basically what it is.
All right.
movie.
Well,
On that note,
yeah. On that note, that's the end of our reviews for this week. Thank you guys again, always, for listening to us.
especially
Please,
you guys in Ghana, shout out.
all you Ghanese fans out there, love you.
Ghanese? Ghana?
Is that right?
Ghana? I have no idea.
Go
But,
down.
Send us an email. Let us know. Actually,
Come on, man.
Yeah, shoot us an email.
Let us
from
know.
Ghana.
correct us.
And our email again is horriblepodcast@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at horriblecast. That's HORROR podcast or cast, depending on whether
Well,
it's email or
it'd be
Twitter.
Horrible.
BLE also.
You messed
Yeah,
up.
like-
You
You
goofed.
messed up.
What'd I say?
You done goofed.
You just said Horrorcast.
Horrorcast. That's
Yeah,
not
Horrible
us.
Probably some
Podcast.
other very famous podcasts.
Really,
that are
what you
like,
should
"Oh,
do,
it's
go on
great."
Stitcher and type in Horrorble, and
Please
there you
share that
go.
link with your
and
friends,
and you'll
too.
find our info on there as well, I believe.
And
right?
we are actually
Yep.
at this point Googleable, which we were not
There we
before, and
go.
I don't think that's a word, but I just made it up.
Googleable.
Yeah,
I like it. Rolls off the tongue.
Doesn't really. That was tough.
for sure. Yeah, check us out on Stitcher and keep looking out for us on iTunes, which hopefully will be on there soon.
Yep.
Find any social media network, and if we're not on it already, email us and let us know.
And we'll read that out.
Is MySpace still a thing? We might
Are
as
we
well.
still? Are we on Bing? We better get Bing.
Bing.
We better get
Who
Bing.
searches
Bing
with
it.
Bing?
Woof. If you search with Bing, go ahead and email us if that's something you can do with
Probably
Bing.
not from your computer.
Gotta log into Google for
You
that.
Bing user.
Don't forget to add us on
Bingus.
Friendster as well.
Bingus.
Friendster and ShareBear, we're on there as well if you want to check us out.
Bonzi Buddy. If you
Oh,
got
Devin
that
has a few of
installed.
those on his computer
Morpheus,
over there.
Napster,
Netscape.
we're on all of it.
Jesus.
So anyway, again, please, email us, tell us what you think. Tune in for the next week. So we're going to be having interviews, fantastic, awesome, exciting interviews very soon with very big names that you might have even heard about
Oh my
in
God,
the
I can't
past few
wait.
podcasts. So, once again, thank you very much. Much love and stay spooky.
That was so stupid. Why did we do it?
Bye, y'all.
Keep repeating to yourself, it's only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie. Only a movie. Last house on the left.